I hope the audio is working how it's supposed to. Otherwise, it's going to be a short-lived stream. Down, 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 down. Ain't going nowhere but down. At least for now. But, to be honest, doesn't look that bad. Let's see if we can figure out some stuff here. Well, that's kind of been met. So that's the upward one. It's a very bizarre looking section here. All right, where are we going here? It just doesn't exist. The shoulder. Or it's just super weak. Well, if we don't see more upside, it's not a wedge, because there could be a larger wedge structure here, but it's not like playing through. All right. I like to kill all my stuff this morning. Just sort of reset. Good morning. It looks like red, 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 and then IWM's up, but gapped up. So it's sitting on 3 gaps. I feel like, I don't know, man. I don't know with IWM if it's just they're trying to keep propping it up to try to drop it or what. Because it's like strange how the gaps have been less and less and less. Like each of these gaps is weaker and weaker and weaker. I mean, technically it's kind of doing the same thing each time. I'm curious if it's going to make an advancement here. The RSI has been coming down as the price is going up. Heavy amount of selling on Friday on this move. It's strange. I'm not so sure. I mean, if it got to 216, that's sort of like it for me, at least for now. I'm not saying it's going to never go higher. It could go to 220 in theory in one big move here. Kind of mentioned that previously, but I don't really know like what to expect. So what I'm going to wait for this morning is to see some actual like real moves on AMC and GME. They're both down about 1%. There's not much to say. They're kind of sitting on a previous trend. I mean, it's a breakdown locally. It's kind of obvious if you draw the trend right here. It's just kind of a localized drop. We'll see what happens. So I'm not sure. Maybe if it comes back over this one, again, just another localized creek. Localized. It's just kind of chilling out underneath right now. And we already know the downside is where that target is, so it's not complicated. Wasn't that a song? Why'd you have to go and make things so complicated? I don't think it was a country song, but it makes it funnier. Kaboo-boo-boo-doo-boo. It's like somebody just butchered it. Alright, so let's see, hang on. 23, 22. Let's say that's close enough that it's a channel. So we've got a channel down here. We really just need to get back over 534 and 550. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we're not going anywhere until that happens. So there's not really any need to overthink this. The downward trajectory is definitely one that's trying to take you back down to about 5. There's creeks galore here, up and down. I mean, we could find places of support and resistance all throughout pretty easily, I think. So really nothing like super negative this morning. It's just more of the same. I'm going to try to fix some things real quick. I want to make sure I get this one right. And I'm not positive I have it right, so I'm going to get it right. Do the old snap and extend. Yeah, so I know we jumped that yesterday, and I feel like that was, again, pretty self-evident. So even though this is pointing really low, there's another major creek coming down, this yellow one, that I think might hold. And then there's this guy. This is like an ascending creek here. It's sort of strange how many there are. But this has to do with a different structure type. So that's why I'm going to keep it on the chart, because there's another structure here which bounces here. And it either goes higher or it goes lower, but it bounces as if it's like a head and shoulder. And so that's kind of the structure I'm looking at right here, this blue one. So there's quite a bit of competition going on right now in terms of direction. Again, I'm just kind of going to wait on it and see what happens. I'm feeling like IWM might be near the top here, if not at the top. I mean, like, let's be fair, right? So, like, I had 216 as a target, 217. It's hit 215. And when we go back and we look historically at, like, where that is, that's a pretty significant level. So it's not that it can't run anymore. I'm not saying that. It's just more or less that, like, you've definitely got some kind of divergence here. It kind of reminds me of, like, a head and shoulder move, which is sort of strange to think about because I don't really see how it is a head and shoulder, but it's bizarrely a head and shoulder very clearly on the RSI. So it may demand a really deep retracement sometime soon. I don't want to, like, overthink it either, but you know, for me and my part, I feel like a lot of my goals have already been met. So probably going to go ahead and exit some more of my position this morning. I mean, I'm up like 300%. So I bought some of my calls at 28 cents, and they're up to $1 now. So that's pretty good. I think they could get larger. It's not that. It's just that I'm not really positive about this extension here. Like, we need to have a support built above this 215 level. It's like 215.06. And remember, like last week, if you were here, we went back. This is a really important historic support level from the original top range. So we're kind of entering into that original top range. If we were to get support over 215, I do think we'd probably get a pretty big extension. And I'm just looking at this channel. I know I had it way over here, the target, but this channel also is targeting 220. So it's very possible if it were able to get above there that it could go. Here's the kind of the rub, if you will, is that at least for me, my timing doesn't actually have us coming up to the top until the 19th, which is Friday. So that would suggest that you could have about a week of reaccumulation here, like pullback. It hasn't lost its trend per se. I mean, it's lost the initial trend here, which is clear, but I don't think that's debatable. That's this wedge. But I think you could argue that there's a potential channel here. So if it can manage to hold the channel, it may remain bullish, even though, again, there's a pretty strong divergence here on RSI, etc., etc. This is a pretty low time frame. GME is up to 1.34%, so I'm going to check that out in just a minute. This is what I'm trying to get at. Like, the measurements that I made, I feel like are pretty accurate, so I'm not going to doubt myself just because. And there really was only a few different targets that I found, but all of them were between, I feel like almost all of, well, the only one that was close was the Monday one. We had that one on the chart. That was marked off Monday, like end of the day today. So every time I redraw these, I leave the target areas up. So these are previous targets that I found. So really we're just in this kind of cluster of targets. We're already basically there. So any kind of shakeout here would probably just be to crush some options going into a top. And 1 hour is still overcooked. Let's go to daily. Daily is overbought and does look like it's approached the top of the RSI anyways, approached the top of this. Granted, a lot of times the follow through is the moving average. So like debatably, we haven't really seen the moving average catch up. And in a big bullish run, like a huge one, your moving average does get over eventually. But I mean, there's plenty of like sideways in between, like during these runs. I would say like what would be the best comparison right now would probably be to go back and look at, and I know I'm going to go back to GME, so if you're flipping out about it, don't worry. Probably be to look at this area and how we extended upward. Did leave a lot of gaps behind on IWM. Some never got filled. This gap down here at 157 never got filled. Some would argue that it might eventually get filled, but it's not. There's another one way down here at 128. So it's not unheard of that IWM just takes off and doesn't come back for a gap. So where we are now is right here. Like if you look at the chart, there's a, here I'll make it kind of bright. There's a little pocket right there. That's where we are right now. That's where the price action is. So we're basically from here up to like nearly 230. We could be in a really, really good spot to just kind of explode to the upside. If, again, we can kind of build support here. It's a tough one because it's easy enough to see it coming back down right now based on the setup and like where we are. And lately, anytime it's gotten to be overbought, it's had pretty severe pullbacks. If you look at the last few years, yeah, the last couple of years, anytime it's gotten really overbought, except for maybe right here, this is the only time it didn't have like a super severe pullback, but it still had a pretty decent one. So yeah, it's a tough one, man. I think that it's like right where it's at. It could just explode right up to like 220s. It really could, but just as easily, just historically speaking, like this has often had pretty severe pullbacks after hitting an overbought territory. Last time it went pretty high though, so maybe we should use that as a good one, since this is more of a bull market move as opposed to these ones which were bear market. Like as soon as they got to the top, they retreated. So this actually came up to 78 roughly before retreating. So even if we had some pullbacks, we might still get that. I might be right about that 18th. Like we could have a pullback here and then just rocket right back up. Or we could just go. Either way, I'm pretty happy with the results from this. I'm very, very, very happy with it. So waiting for this move for a while, as you all know. GME, boom! Actually, it is kind of a good move. So, all right. So last week, went back and forth on GME, whether or not I thought it was kind of bearish or bullish. And what I found was that the overall impression, unfortunately, on most time frames is there's a lot of hidden divergences that are leaning bearish. And it seemed to me that the targets may be lower than I was expecting. We may only be getting to like 28 initially, and then we may actually need to have like a pretty severe pullback. And I'm looking at this thinking like longer term, what would that look like? It's not necessarily all bad. It's just that you may not actually advance right away. We'll see how this goes. But the localized S-curve here definitely gives me a vibe of like, okay, well, there's only really a couple options if you get up to 28. One is that you find a continuation. And it's fairly, again, easy to see where that would be, because it's like you would come back and you would land on the previous support, and you'd have to advance from there. And that would mean like if it came above to 28.80, it couldn't go back below like 27.40. That to me would be a continuation move, and then we could potentially just see it keep going. Because originally the breakout here was measured to like 30. And I believe in that breakout number, but then it did weird stuff. Like we had some like moves that didn't really give it, I wouldn't say they were throwbacks per se, more like a double bottom here. And it didn't really give it, get the momentum that I was expecting on this big break here. So it just kind of went flat and died out. And we actually got divergence on RSI on these two peaks. So overall, like, what could have been a ridiculously huge bullish break here, which is, again, the measurement I was measuring was here, you know, on the move out, and it just barely jumped. You know, it was a really weak kind of move out. Instead, we had a secondary range that kind of built out above instead of just going. So instead of leaping the creek and heading up towards 30, we leapt it and then sat still for like 3 days. And that's not necessarily bad. It's just, in the grand scheme of things, what that tells me is we're not advancing above this bull trend, right? So, again, a couple ways to read it. We could read it symmetrically. We could read it like a head and shoulder. We could do this or that. Generally speaking, like once you jump a creek, usually you kind of expect it to just advance. And if you don't advance, there could be an issue. You know, and this is the predominant creek I want to jump, this yellow guy here going up. So that's really what I want to see on GME for any kind of a bull move, period. And there's other things, like there's obviously levels here and there that we were marking off that need to be met and as kept as support. But largely speaking, like it needs to get above 27.50. That's really like bare bones. Like that's where I want to see. That's where I want to see it, you know, for a bull move. And I don't think if we can't get above there. I think we're going to head back down towards that gap earlier this week, because another way to interpret this would be like a localized M here or here, where like each of these is kind of building out a wave up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down in order to jump creeks. And so when I do that, I kind of have to like imagine like where's the big middle. Usually it's pretty easy. There's a giant jump somewhere. So like early on it's over here. This is a big push out and then pull back. This is the second one right here. This is the big push out and pull back. So like that's the center. It could be an S curve or it could just be like an M cross. And if it's an M cross that comes down, again, this would be peak 1, peak 2. You'd have a distribution here, right? And then what would happen is you'd come down, you'd break below this probably and head towards some other kind of support. My guess is you're going to be heading back towards this guy, this orange guy, because that's the one that ultimately like was last known support on the trend on the first M. So it is a widening, you know, and you could see that. And so there's a danger, of course, of breaking down out of that widening, which leads you back to 23.70. So like there's all kinds of stuff that we could say could happen if we got down to those levels. I think that there's, you know, at this point, it's kind of like what seems most likely to me may not be what's most favorable for most people. And like when I look at this, I could easily see how this could distribute and then head down fill the gap, and then break down again and drop down to both this creek crossing that's larger and the previous support here on 2360. And that could be really where you finally like take off. And it's a frustrating chart, you know, because I had expected to go ahead and break out. So not trying to be like overly bearish, but there's definitely possibilities here of some pretty deep, steep downside. And again, I already talked about all these hidden bearish divergences. There was quite a bit. So I'm not a perma bull. I'm not a perma bear in this particular setup right now because things changed. You know, it became a little less bullish as the time went on because of the setup changing and the lack of buying power here. I mean, you really should have experienced like a bigger push at this point based on the setup. That's just my opinion, and you don't have to agree with that, but that's where I'm at. You know, like structure wise, I feel like it could have already been out. And this is the thing, right, is that when you look at the bigger picture, you can see that we've spent a whole lot of time in the bottom. And this is more typical of distribution, right? When you spend really long periods of time low and then just have these up thrusts. I'm not saying it can't go higher, so don't hear me wrong. What I am thinking is that, you know, if we were to make a move to the upside here, we might see it break here, but then I'm kind of wondering if we hit that like 47 mark and then just kind of crash back down and do this kind of same thing all over again. And at this point, that sort of seems really likely to me. Like the way that GME has been trading seems to kind of have these big pushes and these really steep pullbacks that end up very, very, very flat. Which is unfortunate because I really want to see continuation here, but I don't know if we're going to get it like the way that I was kind of expecting it originally. Yeah. So at this point, that is where I am in the chart. I was kind of messing with some of the indicators. This is on 12. There's quite a bit of time spent. Yeah, there's nothing really to say about the EMAs. They're pretty far below us. NR7's had 3 different green moves on the daily. That again should indicate that you're about to have a break up. These are just basically, all these are just the creek crosses, like 1, 2, 3. So again, unfortunately, it's not really making those advances yet. Yeah, I suppose if I'm being kind of pragmatic, I guess they could really could like push this to the edge, you know. Looks like 215.77. I'm gonna be jumping back and forth on charts today because there's a lot going on. So first thing Monday morning. Yeah, again, this is kind of one of those debatable things. Like, probably could make an argument that it's here or here because the breakdown or the low. And I would agree with both. I would say it could be either one. So, again, it's just odd. Like, look how high we are. We've just been building up. We're already like overbought almost on the 1 hour. It's strange. There's very odd moves here. Maybe that's part of like the reason why we're not moving as quickly. Just trying to keep it like cool. I don't know. $216 on IWM, that's good. That was my target, so. Yeah, so this like wedge here, this could imply that we should be like advancing at least to the 30 mark, which was the target we had up in this little pocket. So I'm kind of curious again, like what's the holdup, you know? We just really haven't made that advancement. This is just Friday nonsense right here, but slow, 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 and then all of a sudden it isn't, right? Yeah, so it seems like this early advancement to 30 that we had on the chart probably was wise. That was just a simple, there's a lot of reasons for it, but there was a simple Bukowski breakout of this like falling triangle, but it's just not really made the move yet. So it's just really slow. As the crow flies, could be more like 31. Yeah, I guess for me, if I'm looking at the implications of some kind of symmetry here, I would probably suggest, yeah, it should be up. Like, if I were just looking at this symmetrically, thinking that this has to be like a similar build out, and I don't know if it is, but if I were, I would say it would be going up and basically hit the high today, 31, and then oddly enough, then you might suggest it could come pretty far back down. I mean, frankly, that doesn't look great to me, but it would make sense. Tuesday, and then be a wild week if it did that. I don't know how, but that's how I would look at it from a symmetrical point of view. You know, kind of ugly, but that's generally what I would see, assuming it did do it symmetrically. There's other ways to interpret this, obviously, and not everything that happens with perfect symmetry. So, but it does follow. I mean, there is a decent chance of that happening. There's a yeah, there's a rise here that we haven't come back to. I'm curious if this actually tracks towards the top. It might. It drops off here. See that? So if you go from like the bottom on the 25th to the drop-off point on the 28th, you can see it. It's there in the chart. That's the trajectory, and then it dropped low, and really kind of avoiding that. It's almost like a wave, just a giant wave down as we're crossing creeks. I don't know if we're going to come back down this low. We could. I mean, we can come back down that low and fill the gap. And it would chill out the RSI. Anyways, that's a decent guess though for today. Okay, well, it went low and hit that trend. So that's actually good, because when we talked about coming down to get the gap fill, one thing that didn't quite work with the gap fill, and I don't know if, again, this isn't over yet, but one thing that didn't quite work very well with the gap fill was the tendency for AMC on these moves up to follow like a lower trend in a way that makes sense. So there's typically like a build out here that's almost like a head and shoulder wind up unwinding, and then usually what you find is that there's a rising trend that follows this bigger creek jump. So we're talking about a big jump here, right? Because we're not talking about 2 or 3 minute chart. We're talking about like on the big picture, right here. Like it jumped over this downward trend, right? It took a long time to kind of get there, but it finally did it. And I don't have it on this chart, but it's right here, right? So we had this kind of bigger push, and that's been really important because there's always a tendency for AMC to come back and check it And we didn't have like a bad breakout or anything, but we didn't really check it either with a lot of strength. So there's questions in my mind about that, like whether or not we will eventually come back down for it, or if it's going to be now or later. But normally once that happens, I call this like M1, M2, right? You've got to rise, and that eventually could break down. And if it does, then you end up with like a whole second part of this M that just goes down low. And if it doesn't, it usually holds on this. So these upward trends that exist, in theory, you can kind of see it on the RSI better. You can see the double M shape here. That's what I'm trying to say. Like in theory, that's possibly like the end of that sequence. So if it holds on these trends, I always kind of think about it again as like winding up and unwinding positions. And then if it can manage to hold here, this could be very, very good. It may mean that we don't fill this gap. Now, looking at like GME, could it have a break to the upside and then come back down and fill the gap? Sure. That would be more of like us coming up and doing a shoulder here. Technically, we're already on the shoulder line, which is around 530. So, like, technically speaking, like maybe we just don't have a shoulder, that we want to see a certain kind of thing. But I don't want to be like super bearish or anything, but it's not impossible that this could do a little bit of a higher rise and then break down low and go ahead and fill the gap, and finish that structure. And I don't know exactly what that looks like. Frankly, the way this is set up is pretty low. It would be like that. And this sometimes happens as well in the sequence where you get like almost like a triple top. I wouldn't necessarily call it like a head and shoulder classically, but usually that ends up resulting in some downside. And then in this case, this is not all bad because we actually have a gigantic inverted head and shoulder. And so much like what we were talking about previously, it's like, well, has it already kind of come down? I don't know, we've measured it out. Seemed like it's possible that it could be finished because timing wise, it's already in the middle. This is the low. This is the low. But I made a case last week that if we came down and filled the gap, really, if you look at the neckline up here, this is the steepness of the neckline. You can see the same build out. And so it wouldn't be super weird if we came low. So even though this might be like a breakdown, this could actually result, much like GME, in like a really huge pushback out that kind of finally makes like the bigger advance back to the upside. Does that make sense? So these are just thoughts. These aren't meant to be like perfect predictions for the week. It's just ideas about the way this is structured, like how it could move, the likelihood of certain advances versus others. Yeah, like frankly, my bigger concern right now is this is already like shouldering. And I'm not really positive we're going to make any other highs here. Not that that's a huge deal, but you can just tell like that's where the shoulder is like between 530 and 536. We've already kind of tested it 1, 2, 3, 4 times here. So hard to say. Lots of wicks on the bottom here. So again, there's a lot of pressure to the upside. How could we avoid this altogether? Probably the only way I could see us avoiding it is just go ahead and make an early jump. It might still require a downside, but we would end up like avoiding some kind of massive retracement, right? That to me would make sense on a number of levels, but I just have to see it. And it's very simple. It's basically just like you have to find support above 532 and then find support above 548. We've already talked about, we talked about that last week. Like that seems like the higher path. So very, very similar in terms of like timing and setup. wise, timing wise to this other one that we have, but it would basically just not go down to the bottom. We'll see. We will see. Clean this up a little bit more. So what's going on, IWM? You just pushing. Making me look good, I guess. That's interesting. It came to like the middle line. There's a potential place to stop. I didn't exit any of my positions yet. I'm just kind of waiting. I'm just kind of sitting on them. Mostly because this did jump the creek. So I was like, well, I was talking myself out of selling early because I was like, it's going, so you should just wait. But this is a potential place to stop right here because of the middle line. I think if it can continue maybe a little higher to 217, but I mean, I'm really pretty satisfied overall with the move. So I'm just going to kind of wait until I'm ready to pull the trigger and get out for now. Anywhere between 216 and 220 was kind of my upper target. I held all those lower calls. I got rid of some of the other ones that were not as lucrative. So, you know, that's a win for Team Booksy, I guess. Wow, it was really low viewership today, huh? Like 55? What's going on? People don't want to watch the charts go today? It's a Monday. Usually Mondays are like the highest day. It's strange. I didn't share it on the Discord group. I don't really care that much about viewership, but like, no, I care about you guys, but I don't care that much about like numbers, but it's usually just Monday is usually a really high day. So, yeah, I know, he almost got killed or whatever. I'm not trying to downplay it, don't hear me wrong. There's never an excuse to murder somebody. It's just not right. But now there's going to be conspiracy theories on both sides about whether it was set up by this person or this person, you know. I'm just curious, like, where's everybody at? Avril Lavigne, that's right. Where's everybody at this morning? This is kind of bummer, man. Because you're turning bearish on meme stocks? Yeah, sometimes. They heard me on Friday. They don't want to tune back in. I wouldn't say turning bearish. I'm saying I play like the bear. Like, invest like a bull, think like a bear. That's how I tend to be with these meme stocks. So, I guess there's some folks that don't understand why I would do that, but like, that's the way I want to think about things. I want to think about it like as if I'm a bear, even though I'm investing like a bull. Because I think longer term, these setups still have like a lot of huge potential to the upside. Like, I know that I messed up with the whole like, oh, it's going to hit 15 within the first couple weeks of July. That's done. Like that's an error. It's a tick against me, right? And all the same, it's like I had 216 on my chart for, I don't know, like a month plus on, I feel like it's been like that for a while on IWM. So, you know, like, you win some, you lose some. And some of it could just be timing, maybe there is a big move and we do have a big advancement on both of these guys within the next week or so, in which case I was early. But at the same time, it's like you have to just evaluate what's in front of you. You can't trade what you want the stock to do. You can't just say like, well, I want it to go up, so therefore I have to interpret the chart as a bullish thing all the time. Everything in its place. So if it's in local time frame, if it's bearish, then I'm going to say it. And I don't feel bad about it. I was not wrong to say that this top was bearish. You know what I mean? It's not about right or wrong, though. It's about just doing it accurately as possible. So like, by being correct about the short term, that immediately meant that I was going to be wrong about the setup on the big picture, because at least for the short term, because as soon as we came up on Monday, what did I say? It was weak. I didn't like that we formed a gap, and then we have these up thrusts. And the only thing I could say about the Monday price action was that weird up thrust at the end of the day looked kind of bearish. And then Tuesday didn't do anything different. It was still bearish. So like, I knew by saying like, well, it's probably going to come down, that meant that we probably weren't going to have a big run. I didn't try to squeeze it in and say like, it's got to happen. And people kept asking me, do you still think we could hit 15? Do you still think we could hit 15? And I'm like, well, yeah, I think it's possible, but the setup right now changed. I mean, at least I'm here to talk about it. I don't know. I feel like that's the best I can do for you when things don't go the way they're expected to go, or you think they're going to go. I don't know, man. I hear about these other people, like, I'm not trying to compare myself to other people. I guess that's not a wise thing to do, but people that like bail out, I guess, when it doesn't go their way. And I'm like, well, when you put on some kind of a stream or something, like, you have to be accountable for whatever you say. So if you say something that doesn't follow through, you're going to be accountable for that. Like, why even invite the attention, and why even invite the audience if you're not going to be willing to be held accountable? And accountability in the present is different than other things. I mean, obviously we can go into that and like talk about a million things, but whatever you guys want to talk about. But like, really, like, I'm just talking about in terms of what you say on here with a stock price movement. That ultimately is like what I'm saying. So I don't know, man. So I feel like it sucks that it didn't happen last week. I'm not happy about that. But at the very least, I was willing and able and flexible enough to say, like, it changed when it didn't make the target that I wanted it to hit. And I was here for that. I mean, I was here for it. I called it out correctly. I gave people a heads up. So if there's folks that just come on because I'm bearish or I'm bullish, and then they hear that I'm bearish and they leave because they don't want to hear it, well, that's not my fault, Because I'll hear people say that they sunk a bunch of money into something. I'm like, well, first of all, you should never do that based on what just one person says, especially if they're not somebody that's supposed to be a financial advisor. But secondly, why would you not have some kind of an exit plan? And if you're not going to follow through with it, and like, why bother? Like, because I monitored it and saw the change, and I'm sitting here like Monday, Tuesday, arguing on my own channel with bulls. You know what I mean? Like, that's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be rocketing on Monday, Tuesday. Instead, I'm sitting there saying, yeah, it didn't do what we were expecting it to do. And now I'm arguing a bearish case last week, Monday, Tuesday, going into Wednesday. And it's like, why am I arguing a bearish case? Because it doesn't look good. But you said it was going to go up. Yeah, I did. Both things are true. Like, I said both things. I'm not going to apologize for like a short-term change when it's not what I expected to have happen. That's just not what I expected to have happen. But I felt really bad. You know, I felt really bad about Wednesday about the breakdown. I took a break on the Thursday because I was just like, I'm not going to be able to bring a great mindset because I didn't like that I was so off, you know, with the timing. And I ate that loss on those $6 strikes. So on this breakdown here, I was like, I'm done. I guess I'm out. Wednesday, I got out because I was like, it's not going, you know, and it's frustrating. And you just take it and you move forward. That's called rolling with the punches, you know. But it's just strange. I guess a lot of people, that's not the way they trade. They think if you have a setup and it looks great that it's got to complete, and it just doesn't. It doesn't have to complete. We got like, I don't know, like 7 targets in a row or something. It's almost ridiculous how accurate it was until this top. But that's why, you know, when you go into those trades, you think about those areas that there could be problems. And this was definitely an area that I had marked off pretty early on as a danger zone. I think I called it a danger zone, joked about the Top Gun song. But I was saying that, like, this area just seemed like a dangerous zone because you could get stopped. I didn't want it to happen, but that's what ended up happening. So I thought it might just blow past it. We'd already traded a lot of that area. We blew past a lot of stuff. And we oddly had a really good trading week on that holiday week. That was kind of strange, you know, all things considered. IWM really chilled out and didn't do much at all that week, and so did GME. But AMC had a really good week that week, so. But anywho, I digress. Let's stop trying to be defensive. Not really being defensive. I guess it's just more of like, I want you to know where I'm coming from, because I think a lot of people misunderstand, like, why am I acting like bearish about certain things? Why am I thinking about this like it could do something not good? Because I want to be prepared. That's basically what it is. So it looks like IWM is trying to make its push to 216.50s. I'm just happy with this move. I mean, obviously the AMC and GME moves didn't happen in the time that I wanted them to happen. AMC made a pretty big stride towards it. I mean, considerable stride towards it, right? Like going from 430 all the way up to the 570 mark. And then it kind of stopped out, and we need to now have a reaccumulation or else, you know. And then GME just has been very, very low and slow and steady. Nothing horrible, just very, very easy going, if you want to say that. Just really boring trading weeks here, going up across these creeks and just kind of waiting for that explosive exit. And I don't know if it's going to get everything, you know, or if it's going to end up coming back down first. I don't really feel like that would necessarily be bad, because if we came down first, you got to imagine, like, what does that mean for the stock? If we come down first and then it advanced really quickly, we may not need to come back down later. And I don't know about you guys, but I'd rather go ahead and do a $2 drop and get to the gap than do something ridiculous like a $10 drop later, you know. That's just me, but oh man, I guess that's it. Let me see if I can find some other information that might lead me to think this is gonna, like, stop or continue here. I really genuinely don't know now. I trust my own targets. That's why I'm, like, considering what I want to do. I trust that the targets are there because the math measures out to that point. And I'm wondering the implications of going significantly higher right now and what that might mean for the market. The jump is obvious. I don't really think I care that much about the lower gaps at this point. The higher gaps might get filled. I feel like everything right now is just like bonus round content, you know, like you've already done bonus round. You've already done I don't know, kind of already done the move I thought we were going to do. So my upper target was here at really the intersection is actually like 215.70, but I thought it would reach because of where the midline is, I thought it would reach maybe 217. So I kept saying 216 because it's kind of in the middle. I feel like it's high enough. How's AMC looking? Fine. It needs to build support above 32 here, 30, 32. And even still, like, we could build support here and head up and reject around 540 again. There's a longer standing creek from the top down. It's essentially like forming kind of a wedge. So there's a possibility that wedge breaks and then you end up finishing what we would call like a, so right now it looks more like an ABC correction kind of thing. Like ABC, and then you're done and you start a new move. But there's a possibility it's just there's a fifth wave down here, and I think that would be towards your gap fill. And it's basically just coming down and fulfilling a channel drop instead of more of a wedge. Right, you can see the wedge a little more clearly on this right chart. So 532 is a hot zone still, but if we're over this creek, I'm a little more bullish. If we're underneath it, I'm a little more short-term bearish. That's just me looking at the structure and the possibility of kind of bonking your head here and then distributing. And this is basically just like a cat ear, fancy-looking cat ear right here. Up thrust 1, up thrust 2. And then you would just drop low for the gap. And it's really similar to what I'm talking about on GME here. Like there could be an early drop or it could advance and then drop later. And either one would make sense to me at this point. So yeah, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like good about it. These calls on IWM are up to $1.40. So they're up 40 cents from this morning. Really don't want to push my luck here. It's a really good gain. I know it's strong. That's 400% to the upside. That's a considerable gain. I hate the idea of just playing away from profit because at this point I'm like, I already did that, you know. I already covered my bases, so covered my cost basis. So I'm really already just kind of playing with profit now. I don't know, man. I don't think we're going to go significantly higher. And if we did, we'd probably go to like 220. I'm not usually this slow to take profit, but that's me patting my cat if you hear that. Come on, get down. Thank you. Right. So we'll watch AMC as it approaches this top. I don't know, man. GME didn't advance. It just looks like it's backing up, though. I think it's going to try again. This just looks like a flag. It looks like it's backing up to this creek. So, like, local creek here, this guy. So I'm going to take a guess that this is going to try to advance again. just based on that setup. Did anyone out there play with IWM? Did any of you guys trade that big upside? Everybody's like, take the profit, take the profit, take the profit. That's weird. Yeah. Well, I was wrong. So, gyro, I really thought that it would be early July. So, right now we're kind of mid-July. So, to be fair, like I said early to mid-July, but I really meant like the first 2 weeks. So, like timing's clearly off on that. It's hard to do that kind of stuff because you know that at least I know like some folks are going to try to play that way too close to the chest. I only had one option that really got messed up. So I know I'm up 400. I know you guys are like, take the profit. I got out way too early at 210. Well, so that's the kind of stuff like I don't really know. I know that IWM has a tendency to run pretty hard. And so like when we hit 210, this area, I didn't really blink at it. I just kind of got rid of some that were like higher cost basis that were just kind of coming into the money and like looking better just to lower the rest of my average. And it's a weird, maybe that's not the best tactic. You might think that you could hold those longer. And I kind of tend to agree, like there's two different ways of doing it. You could exit the ones as everything hits 60% or 70% or 80%. You could do it that way. I actually kind of did it the opposite. So now I'm only playing with the ones that I bought at the lowest cost basis. And those are the ones that are growing the most. So it's almost more like a way of kind of doing a parabolic kind of exit where I'm taking very little profit early from weaker ones and then holding the stronger ones longer. I'm just kind of the opinion that like it's sort of gone as far as I think it needs to go. But I could see how there's a possibility here. I don't want to overshoot it, but I could see how there's a possibility here if it can hold the support, because it made support above 215. Like, you got to remember like where we are historically. That's what's causing me to kind of sit here and wonder. We're in a place that we haven't been at in a long time. And I don't want to say the sky's the limit because it's not the sky, but we definitely haven't been in this range in a long time. So the early extension here went up to like 218. You can see that. So that might be a decent place to kind of also draw a line, is to say like, well, when this originally came into this range, it went up to 218. I could see that. It seems like kind of like a middle zone here for liquidity, maybe in this area. So I could see that as well as a strong case for like, hey, let's not push our luck too far. And that kind of follows because I saw a potential target at like 220. So I guess that kind of answers my question. That we're probably as high as I really feel like we need to be right now. So I waited a while. They're up to like 150 now. So I got an extra 50 cents this morning being patient. I'll leave like 2 runners. I don't think I need to specify lots, but whatever. Might as well do it. I might need to change the bid on that. My thing is this, it's like, how long did I wait for the move? How much did I invest in it? How much energy did I spend on it? Like, I just don't want to get out before I see something really positive, come from that. So I want to make sure my profits grow as best as I can, not shoot myself in the foot, So they drop back down. I think it's just because we're experiencing a little bit of a pullback. Let me see what that looks like. Because if it broke a trend, I might need to go ahead and quick exit. Just do like at the market or something. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Trending, volume trending down, RSI trending down. That's an hourly chart. Feel like it's either going to base here or drop because it's at this kind of plateau right here. All right, I'm just going to do it at the market offering. It's fine. Not bad though. Still got an extra 40 cents on that trade. So I'm still holding 2. I exited most of my position. I'm still holding a few. Yay. Yeah, I normally don't advocate. I would probably tell somebody else to get out if they're up 400%, but I guess I'm just feeling the move, trying to feel it out, see what's happening. Let's be positive and look ahead. Yeah, I'm with you. There's not a super negative outlook here for AMC. It's more like a question of where do we find support first and where do we find resistance, and so simple stuff. Because right now the setup is not finished. Like, we have to make a certain kind of move in order to exit. We haven't made that move yet. So even though we're up 1.5%, which is fine, I'm really focused mostly on this zone right here above 532. And if we can find support and break this higher creek, we may end up with a decent move to the upside that then results in maybe a pullback to this area, which with support, and that would be positive. So it's looking to me like the natural place would be that 548. And I think I talked about this briefly. So if you look at this as like wedge action here, and you go to sort of the top of that wedge movement, and you go to the bottom here and you draw it out to a 60% breakout level. I want to say it's like right here. It kind of brings you right back up to this previous supply zone. So it's possible that if we get the extension, we could basically end up right back here again. And that makes sense for a number of reasons. Obviously, I've got the cross there already, but that could still result in what I would call like a head and shoulder move. So I've already drawn it out. You know, we could still have an extension up and drop back down. And technically it could break down here too, you know, like I've only got 2 options drawn, but you could have a secondary breakdown right here at like 540 and drop again. So it could be a combination of these two. The idea is the wave, like where is the wave? Somewhere in the midst of this is the wave. And the higher and the more support you have above this yellow creek coming down or this blue creek coming down, it's the same thing on this chart. The more likely you are to have just continuation, which is a good run. So, and then if you can drop below it, you're more likely to, or you don't find any way of getting above it as a resistance, then you're more likely to come back down and go ahead and get that gap fill, and you're just really following through on in my opinion, on just more of a channel markdown or a channel retracement, which isn't super bearish, not really. It's just a matter then of doing the same thing but lower. That unfortunately means it could take a lot longer. So if you're looking at it like that, you're like, well, what's to say that doesn't take another week? You know, I don't know. There's nothing really that says that except for the timing. The timing on the whole here doesn't seem to work with that. You know, like in my opinion, for what it's worth, I don't feel like the timing makes sense that way to like go all the way out to here, maybe to Thursday or Friday this week, but there's no other room beyond that. It's just sort of, again, it's another dead setup. So, and then we're just kind of waiting on GME as well. There's not much to talk about on GME just yet. I want to talk about it, but there's not much to say. We jumped the most micro creek we have here, which is really just from Friday. It's price action. So that's positive. We moved up above, and we're at the top of that range. I think we're just doing a little bit of a bull flag right now. That's what it looks like to me. Just really tight chopping action to the downside, probably to come back to 26.20. If that were to break down without any kind of an upthrust, I'd be a little surprised. So if it were to just suddenly drop, that'd be weird. I think if we were going to drop, it'd be more likely you get some kind of push up to like 26.50 and then drop. It'd be really strange to kind of just like push it down and then do this and then just drop. I don't know. Stranger things have happened, but that'd be bizarre to me. So we're just kind of waiting. I think on the big picture, it's gap fill now or gap fill later. I don't really think it matters too much. I don't. Some ways I don't really care, but yeah, I'm seeing a strong possibility that we hit, like, I know it sounds like a lot, but today or tomorrow that we get to like 30, 31. I just don't know if we need to drop first. Bitcoin. 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 Crypto. Anime stock market. They haven't made one. They will eventually. All right, so let's talk about MPW for just a minute. I haven't touched on this at all today. It's not because it's red. I'm not really concerned about that. I actually felt like that whole price action Thursday was like insane. I don't think I've seen anything quite like that in a while. Just the way that happened. So it seems to me that we need to gain support temporarily, and we haven't really gotten that yet. So we're kind of walking back down into where this gap was. I'm thinking that gap was designed around this LP or this last point of supply over here that we were walking down, and it's really where the primary selling kind of starts. If you look closely, you can see the heavy selling right around this marker in this region. So my thought is all that heavy selling, you know that it's like a sell zone, right? Somebody entered a huge position there, either exiting a huge position rather, or just frankly just entering a huge short position there and to drop the stock down, probably both. And so that region, I think about it, you should think about that kind of stuff when it makes a big climax like that, selling climax, is like those are going to be needed to be, reversed on the way back out. Just volume as an indicator. So volume as an indicator here would indicate that yes, we need to find supports here and here. And I think that's fairly straightforward. So I'm wondering, that gap seemed to be built a little bit around that supply. So I'm wondering if that was like a covering and then somebody dropped it, exited position, and then, you know, the operators bought back in. There's a lot of weird stuff that happened here. I know it was a creek retest. Doesn't quite look like it on this chart, but there's a wick down here. So I know that there's a lot of really positive stuff that's been going on MPW. I don't really feel nervous about it at all. But last week when the chart kind of did what it did and the craziness that it did, it still kind of set up like as if it didn't ever find support. Like we just sort of passed through this area twice. 3 times, 1, 2, 3 times, just kind of combing over this 445 region. So the fact that we're sitting in that area right now should not come as a surprise because it's really not been traded at all until right now. You see that? You see how we just kind of dumped through it here, jumped over it, dumped through it, jumped over it. Now we're finally like sitting on it. So it's a natural place to kind of go back and trade and see if they're going to find liquidity. I don't know. There could be another one down lower at the 436 marker, like right here. This is a possibility as well. This is another area that was kind of like pushed down through. So I don't know. Moving averages, 15 minutes, kind of right below. I'm not sure where the others are. 30 minute, we were just bouncing on it. So 1 hour is probably above us slightly, yeah. So we're kind of pinched between the 30 minute and 1 hour. It makes sense. This is pretty normal for any stock. It approached this blue creek that you see. This is the big one. And it is the big one. If you were talking about this as some kind of massive corrective wave on this first big push up, this first giant uptrend goes from really low, and it is a big uptrend. It goes from 293 all the way up to 660. That's a big move. So that did have sideways action in the middle, but ultimately you can kind of see it's just a gigantic S-curve to the upside. I mean, like I said, it's important to like kind of just see things in perspective, put it in its place, because that's a 126% move. So if this is like an ABC correction and it doesn't have another wave down, it's pretty much finished. It could have been finished here, arguably, but it, you know, it didn't happen there. That was another one that I didn't get quite right. And so then you look at where it went to a golden pocket retrace down here. So at this point, really just kind of waiting to see if it can break that trend. So ultimately, like the fact that it's meeting, this is not something to like be hyper predictive about. It's more just like matter of fact. Like I expect AMC will do the same exact thing if and when it gets up to like $9. It's going to meet that daily moving average at a potential creek. Like it's going to do it. So I don't know exactly how the algorithms are able to do that just in general, but it always seems to work that way. So there's usually some kind of major intersection. So this is just a major intersection. So I don't see it as like a negative thing that it didn't jump it, because it already pushed over this creek and pushed resistance. So it's already pushed out. Now it's just got to find support, and then it should jump. And I expect it will jump the moving average at the same time it jumps this creek, and probably the same time that it jumps, frankly, like back into this previous range right here, around the 460s. So I'm just kind of waiting on it. There's not much else to say. I don't know if the chop is going to be long-winded. I genuinely don't care right now on MP. I'm only in long positions on this, and I'm just looking at, yeah, sure, it could come back down to 438. Like I wouldn't bat an eye if it kept chopping here. But you know, if you're just kind of like anxious about it, just draw like a very simple, it's almost like a channel, maybe a little bit of a widening here, but it's just something really straightforward. And then just watch it and watch for that breakout. You don't have to have all the huge markers up here, although I would encourage you to take this big one at the least, and then this one. If you have those two, you've pretty much got all the information you need. So I think if it jumps back above up to 455 again. Starts making new highs. This is where it dropped off right here. Starts making new highs. From there, it's probably broken both the creek and the hourly. Don't want to speak out of turn. I'll have to double check when it gets there, but like that's what I would expect. So, and then I would expect continuation. I don't think it's gonna. Personally, don't think it's gonna stall out here for an indefinite amount of time. I think it'll be, you know, either here or here. There's not that much time, 1 or 2 days, and then it should advance. And if it happened to go the other way, then I'd have to just deal with it, you know. So it's just a waiting game. So I'm not going to focus too much on this today. That's kind of mostly what you're going to get unless we get a breakout. I'm still really bullish on it. Still have a very large amount of positions. Very large amount of positions. I rolled a lot of my profits too into that. Maybe too much. Knock on wood. Bitcoin quietly making moves back up. Yeah. So the big news this week is an attempt to assassinate a presidential candidate. And I don't know how you interpret that in the market. If it's worth even trying to interpret in the market. I don't obviously condone the actions of anybody that tries to take a life, but so I'm not trying to treat it like it's a pithy thing, like, oh, it's not important, or it's like, how does it affect us making money, you know? I'm not going to try to trivialize it like that. But there would be certain implications, right? Like, and I don't know what the historical implications have been. I'm not sure if that's happened for a while, you know, to have that kind of a headline and what that would do to a market. I'm really not sure. So if you're wondering if I'm going to talk about it, probably not going to talk about it very much, if at all, other than just to kind of say I obviously don't condone that. And I think it's a horrible thing that happened. And that's all there is to it from my point of view for now. I do think somehow it's going to have ramifications, but I don't exactly know what that would mean. I'm trying to remember in my brain. I can't remember the last time a candidate was, you know, somebody took a shot at a candidate. I mean, we all know, like, the big ones, but the presidents that were killed, but I mean, going all the way back to, like, Abraham Lincoln and, you know, what was it? Was it Hamilton and Burr? Was it Aaron Burr got in a duel with Hamilton or something? I can't remember who it was. That was a different time, though. JFK. Things like that, but he's a candidate, so I'm not sure what in a prior president, so I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if it's appropriate, first of all, to talk about it in like terms of market implications. It feels kind of icky, you know. So I'm going to try to steer away from that. I'll say that there probably would be some kind of implication, but I don't know exactly what it would be. So we'll just kind of leave it there. I mean, if any world leader really, I mean, it just depends on what they're doing, and I guess it's how you think that affects the future or doesn't affect the future. So IWM made a turn again, kind of found some support mildly at 216.24. This is the level we were chopping earlier. So I'm on the 6-minute chart, so I'm already at a pretty low time frame here. And it could be like the middle of an S curve, or it could be a top. Excuse me. The volume has dropped off a little bit as it's rounded up. I don't say anything particularly negative about it. I'm just kind of watching it. There's just nothing really to say right now. other than it kind of already met my target, so I exited a good bit of my position for a good bit of profit. I'm happy about that. I'm just kind of leave it there. And the rest of it's just runners, just to see what happens, you know. You got to take your winners when you get winners, so it's good to have winners. And I haven't looked at ChargePoint today. It looks like it's down a little bit. Down 1%. That's not a big deal. Really nothing is moving very much today. Everything's kind of, at least on my account, everything's like only a few percent here and there. Except for like options contracts. They're swinging all over the place. But like, nothing seems particularly volatile just yet. IWM's probably the biggest winner today. Everything else is just sort of trying to figure out what it wants to do in terms of moves. EBT came back down into the little pocket. Again, nothing really to say about that just yet, but it made that early advancement on Friday, and then it just kind of dropped back in. So we'll see. Just sort of sitting there. ChargePoint is looking pretty spicy still. So I have a lot of clutter on this chart. I'm going to try my best to sort of remove some of the clutter. This red was like my estimation for maybe what happens going up. But I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to get rid of this white line for now. No, I'm not. I'm not getting rid of that. What about the blue one? I'll get rid of the blue line for now. I think that's the trajectory. So that's been following really well. So my target is like $3 for ChargePoint, and I think that's reasonable. I think we'll get there. I don't know long term if it's going to be able to make greater strides, beyond that. But I think that on the whole, it's been mostly positive. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Part of me wishes I had invested more back here at like $1.30, because I knew when it came back down that I thought it was probable that it hit some retracement and continued, because it was coming back towards this creek. And I was like, well, I was humming and hawing about it at that point, thinking that it might it might just hit that creek and come back up. And I was right about that, but it didn't really feel like when we got down here. I think I bought some more at 130, but I didn't like have as much on hand that I wanted to put into it. But looking back, I think that ship sailed, like I don't think we're coming back down there. If we came back down at this point, we could have a really deep retracement, but I think it may never come back below like 170s. So, and I mean that in the next several months, like 6 months or so, we may not see below like 175 again. So I genuinely think that's a possibility here. But as the crow flies, I think it's very likely it could come up to $3. And then I think we'll have like, I've talked about like late July into August having a possible leg down. And it makes sense when you look at the big picture to have this kind of like push out and then come back down somewhere over here. It could be longer term than that, but that's what I'm seeing right now. So I don't know. It looks really good. There's nothing bad about this. It may even be done with these like localized backups. I talked about it coming back low to 180, like 180s or 170s, but like it already hit 191 and found support. I don't see anything except maybe a little bit of gap here. That could cause an issue. There's a small gap up. Let's see, where's the closing? Closed at, it's not necessarily, hang on, 211? No, that's the second one. It opened at 196, closed at 194. Low of 196, close 194. So there's a small gap, like a 2-cent gap here. So maybe we come back there. But what makes me curious is that we actually jumped above the top here. See that at 206, and we found support here. That's also on a rising cross, big one. See that? So like it's pretty significant that we found support at 206. So I'm not so sure we're going to come back for that gap anytime soon. It might be much later. Oh, maybe not. It would have to be now, or we're just not going to come back, because unless this isn't a wave 4, because wave 4 can't go below 1. So if it just continues from here, it's not going to make that gap fill. If it needs to make the gap fill, it needs to do it like now. And go ahead and drop low. No regrets on IWM. No regrets, Booksy. No regrets. No regrets. Even if it moves here, no regrets. You made your profit. Pressured myself to get out of the position. And I'm like, what if it's an S-curve? And it just keeps going. It happens, man. I did the same thing on the move up, like around 206 or whatever it was. Like when it last time it had a big run up, I got out really early, and I kind of hit myself. So I'm doing better. I did the same thing. It was over here on this first leg, actually. I got out at like, yeah, it went up to 209. I think I got out when it hit like, man, it was like right here or something. I don't even know. It was in this area around 204s or something. But I got up like halfway up the move. So I did the same thing. Or I did something like that last time. And I was like, well, that was silly. You know, I should have just let the move do its thing. This one I'm less sure of, but I think it could make an extension to nearer 220. Curious about this 218 mark too. That is a historical marker, so I don't know. I got other stocks to think about. So anywho, I think we'll see what happens with ChargePoint. Maybe that's the aim here. See how this made like a lower low on this push. There's a little bit of a, we'll call it volume divergence. The volume's like dropping here while the price was rising. So maybe that's the goal here. If, from a bearish perspective, is like we could take this back down now. And maybe from a bullish perspective too. But like this makes sense to me, like locally, to take it back down. So just kind of finishing up what I was saying about ChargePoint. If it's going to get this little gap, it's really got to do it now, I think. I don't feel like this could happen way later. It has to do with the waves, the Elliott waves, and I genuinely don't think they're going to break them. So I know that sounds a little weird, but I think it has to do with this layup and the need to kind of find support on top of here. This is the bottom, right? So like we don't want to go back down into this bottom again, and frankly, why would we? You know, like if people didn't buy it on here or whatever, you're not going to, unless you have like some kind of massive double bottom here, probably not going to come back down. So massive double bottom, not out of the question, but I think that would be way later. So long term, I'm really looking at $3 and being done with it. And I don't know. I guess we'll see from there. I didn't draw this one. I could draw this one. Yeah, I guess that's similar to the $3 one, though. I think we're going to hit 3, and I think we're just going to, like, chop down for a while. And then come down. It might be closer to November, because I've got it going down to September, but I can't remember what the trend extension was on this. No, it's exactly like $3. It's like 304. It's like perfect. So that's a really classic extension, is the 1618. Could it go higher? Sure. Could go way higher, but that's sort of where I would look at a probable top for now. And then sometime maybe coming back down. We may not actually go that low. We may not go below 229, because that's another top over here. Another logical place. Potential support here, if we can jump it. No. Yeah, 1618 is too low. It's not too low for a backup. It's just too low for an Elliott wave. If it went up to 3, couldn't come all the way. I mean, it could come all the way back down here. Don't get me wrong. That's a high liquidity zone. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure it matters that much if it matches an Elliott wave or not. But in terms of a wave, it wouldn't go that far. But the 382 is like 220. So that could work. And that's sort of the top we just made here. See that? So maybe. That's really close. Actually, it's like right on the dot. There's like 3 wicks there. One of that 220 level is important for other reasons. If you're angry that I'm not looking at AMC and GME, I'm looking over at the price every now and then. I'm waiting to see what happens with AMC at 530. I just don't really have a lot to say if it can't break over this level. I think we're going to have a probable breakdown. So we just need to monitor at this 530 level and see if it can make the advance up. Nothing really else to say about it right now. It's just that's the zone we're in. I marked it off early in the morning, and we're just kind of right there. It's the same old story. If you can get the advancement, probably going to hit that 550 area. You know what I mean? But we need to see a creek jump with support if we're going to advance. So GME is a little different. It didn't really make anything. Again, it kind of jumped the most local of creeks, which was built out on Friday. That means that there was a resistance. We were pressing up against it all day Friday, and then Monday we dropped, and then Monday we jumped it. We had this kind of bull flag, which looked like it would break back to the upside, and it did. And then we're just kind of waiting to see if it can continue an advancement now. I think we might go ahead and head for that high. You know, we're on the we'll call it a slingshot mode right now. I don't know why this is way over here. Maybe because of this guy. Should be like right there, and it should get up pretty high today if it can finish that slingshot. It should get a really big move suddenly if it can hold here in advance. So you can keep drawing creeks if you want. I haven't really made a whole lot of extra noise this morning on my charts, just kind of adding little things here and there. So right here, maybe coming back above 2670 and then making some advancements would be a positive. Otherwise, it just looks like a jump over a creek with a retest, which is fine. Again, it's nothing particularly good or bad about it. It's just mostly positive, I guess, if you were going to pick a direction. The reason I hesitate to say it's definitely bullish any time this happens is because of the nature of a UT, which is taking it up and then selling high. I don't see a whole lot of volume in the top. I see most of the volume right here in the cross, and then the volume kind of died off on the top, so it looks pretty bullish right now. This is a little different than last week. We were getting a lot of high volume tops, which I didn't like, so a lot of selling. But that is also selling off of a level here at 25.96 that we're now buying off of. So like, if you look at the previous week here, we were right around this $26 mark all week, and you can see that we spent a lot of time selling off from 26. So this was a big retest last week. When it pushed up, I think I said it pretty clearly. I thought it was going to come back down to 26, and it did. It came a little lower and tested this rising trend, which is good. Any trend that holds is a good trend. So at this point, it's either pinching into like what we would call a cat ear top, where you have like a 1-2, right? In the classic cat ear, I see the alert for MPW. The classic cat ear goes like this, right? We've seen this kind of stuff happen. And what this is it's a representative of a UTAD setup, right? Where you have a UT. This did push above the previous top at 26.43, and now it's doing it again. So the way this works in our favor is if you get to that second ear and it advances, basically. And it can have like a downward move at the end and still advance. But it has to do, a lot of it has to do with, unfortunately, like there's like a final move here. And the most common thing I see on almost every stock in the market is that the final move, if it has like a head fake, it usually doesn't bode well for the stock. So this isn't always the case because it's complicated. You have to look at levels, but this is almost the most common way we distribute, I think, across the market, to be fair, where you get kind of a quick head fake and then you drop back below. You might make a higher high and then you drop back below resistance, and usually at that point you break whatever uptrend. So what maybe a Bukowski trader would look at is a pattern that's got a double, like a fake out, like a head fake with a reversal. So that's the most common distributive pattern that we see, I think. I feel like that one happens almost all the time whenever it distributes. It's like, oh, there's a little push up and then it dropped. So usually when it's bullish, this advancement pushes up and it's set up higher so that there might even be a head fake low first. So it kind of has a low drop and then it advances by building out a support here. This is the most classic example that you can find of like that kind of, it almost looks exactly like what you see in the June setup for AMC, but it is really the way it goes. And a lot of people will see this and they'll say it's a cup and handle or something because of the way it usually has like a bowl shape with a little handle on the end, but it has to do this above the creek. It has to. It just does. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you think it's bearish or you think it's bullish. If it doesn't do this, it's not really bullish. So we usually get to about this point in the chart, which is kind of where we are now. And I am the most questioning that I'm going to be, in any setup. So I think this setup is absolutely coming to a close. There's no way around the nature of it, right? Which is basically like, here's how I would define it, okay? So ignoring maybe this S-curve, I think the S-curve represents something important, but we don't need to like overthink it. So everything is iterations. So you have different sizes of shapes here, different wavelengths, if you want to call it that. So some of these are big. This is a big one right here, right? And you're waiting to see if it's going to break back up. That one's not necessarily finished yet. I was concerned it might be finished because of the length of it and how long this is taking on our side. That's why I was feeling really bearish Friday, because I'm like, I don't know, man. Kind of looks like it's just dead. It didn't do it. But I think locally, probably the most responsible way to look at this, from my point of view, is this guy. So I don't really have this like highlighted or anything. I'll make it maybe bright, and let's do I don't know, like a bright kind of greenish color here. It's probably this guy. So the way I see this is, the reason I think this is important is because there's a push up here. Now I don't want to try to find every little M shape in this, but there's a push up here, and what I'm noticing is that it came low, so it advanced to the creek, right? Clearly, but it rejected, and then it comes low and it crosses. And that's usually an indication to me that it's made you know, like we'll call it an M cross, we'll call it like a wave back up. So then I'm looking at the resulting wave, and then you have to ask you have to have a couple questions in mind. But one of the questions you might ask is, did this wave make a higher high when it pushed out? And the answer is no. So this is a curious thought because it didn't actually come higher. So then you ask the question, is it actually complete, or is this all one move? That's a harder question to ask, because now I'm like having to analyze it on a micro level, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it didn't complete until right here on Friday, in which case, did it make a higher high? Yeah. But then you ask the question, okay, well then where is if that's the advancement, so your wave went up and then came back down and then advanced up again and jumped the creek lower, which is usually what we see in a spring, then what? Is this all part of the same move? Is it building out completely? I mean, these are simple questions, but they have pretty strange answers. You know, a lot of times it's like, it seems obvious, and then you look back and you're like, well, I don't know, man. Like, this clearly had a creek jump right here on the 8th, and if you look at the whole structure of this, it would kind of make you think that it's not necessarily over until the 17th, which is 2 days from now. It's easy to see how that could be a move down. You see what I'm getting at? In which case, what are you checking? Well, you're checking this waveform creek. It's actually not this one. It's actually this one, because it's set up higher. That's the same case I was making before of like, you could see it come back down. Is that necessarily bad? No, because in the grand scheme of things, what you've done is you've advanced here. We've talked about this before, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but basically, like, you made a lower low and then you advanced higher, and as long as you make a higher low here, then a lot of times what we see is the resulting action is it's good to go. This is all over the place in the market. It's not that complicated, but you see that kind of a bottoming action, right? It's a reversal of the trend. So the positive here is we've made a higher high already, right? Perhaps the biggest question is, do we need to make this low reversal and go back and find a support that's down lower? We've left a gap around the midline at 24. It's probable that there's some kind of a retracement here that's natural. If you look at where it went to on the top, at like 2680s from this bottom. Sure, there's a retracement level that's like right there. Let's take a look. Gasp, it's the golden pocket retracement. So the golden pocket retracement, you guys are like, you're such a you're such a jerk, Booksy. The golden pocket retracement is at 2380. So we were talking about this before, because that wasn't even part of this idea. Like, and I wasn't talking about this lower creek. I was talking about the red line, which is the lower creek, but I was talking about the bigger picture on this setup, and how if you look at the way it measures out, you should be going into like this bottoming area or whatever, and blah 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 blah. And we did the measurement for it, so it's kind of interesting because it does make sense. So, and then this is the 0.5, this little pocket right here, which is right where the gap is. So there's a 0.5 retracement here. There's a 618 down here. They both make sense in both the upward creek and downward creek presently, and then also historical price support levels. So there's really no question in my mind that that's a possibility. that we could come down. So when I look at this, I'm like, there is a possible secondary move here that goes up. And that comes from the wave, because I think the waveform potentially, this is just one of them, there's more than one you can look at, but I think the waveform potentially could have a greater extension. Now what's the lower one? Well, the lower one's probably done already, and that would be one that you would basically just look at your S-curve and you'd say, well, the build out is kind of finished and it's got a lower, halfway point, and that's it. Now it's going sideways, it's going to drop again. Either one could be true. And the weird thing about any kind of a S-curve is that it's all in the eye of the beholder. I see this as like possibly like an outward push that's more of a slingshot that could push you up. I could easily redraw this so that that's actually the final extension, and that's just the nature of it. So be careful with curves and S-curves. The best way to do it is to find those cross trends and see if you can identify the best possible one. That's how I got the one on, man, look at that thing go on IWM. There it goes, towards that 218 mark. Dang. You chickened out, Booksy. It's okay. I still have some. I'm just lamenting. They're going to go to like $3 or something. I'm going to be like, could have made like tons of money or something. I don't know. Probably should have only sold like half of them. Yeah, they're up again. Now they're up like 80 cents on the day. 500% up. That's crazy. Oh well. Dixon versus Reagan. That's a, yeah, still, that was a while ago. Dixon? You mean Nixon? Dixon? I don't even remember that. Maybe it was a guy named Dixon. IWM is rocketing. But all things in their place, right? So do I think that it could reach the 220 mark? Yes. Do I think it necessarily does it today? No. There's a historic top around 218 from that range. So when you look at the entry to that range, after you get above here, which it did, after it gets above 213, the next place that the stock finds any kind of major resistance is usually up here around 218. So we're talking a big picture going back towards the very first time we were up in these levels, which is back here. So like if you go back and you look, there's a I don't want to say it's a natural stopping point, but it is this is the place we stopped when we first entered this range back in January of 2021. So coming up to 218 and stopping and making a retracement would not be out of character, just in terms of like this range. Well, does it have to do that, Booksy? Are you sure? Couldn't it just keep going? Just hit 230 and be done with it? I mean, yeah, but it's got to find support somewhere up here. Like you need to have very clear supports built out on certain levels. In this case, it came all the way back down to 206, and I don't know, like, do we need to go back to 206? Maybe. I mean, if we went back to 206, some folks would say that that's absurd. Like, we don't need to go back that low. I would say this. There's two markers that I would look at. One is 211.60, and the other is 206. Like, it's this 207, rather. Sorry, I keep saying 206. Like 207. If you look at this setup, this area is where we peaked into the top here. You see this? And all we did was distribute when we got up here. Notice that, I know I'm adding a lot of these boxes, but notice that this is where support is found when it first enters this area, is like right here. And then this is the same place that support is lost coming down. So looking at where we are now, is something like that happening now in that same area? Is it still in contention? The answer is yeah, it's still in contention. So this is the area that you were having trouble with when this SOS peaks, and this is a big SOS, right? This SOS peaks here, it doesn't advance past that same pocket. So really, in a lot of regards, that's kind of the only, I know it sounds weird, but that's kind of like the only place that I would be really concerned about making sure we have support right now, because we've currently advanced into this pocket. I mean, we're into the lower portion here, so we're moving, you know. In terms of a creek jump, we have to then ask the question, is this a test of the creek? On the daily, I would say no. There's no test here. It's just one candle. When you look at the smaller picture, there's a little bit of a check here on these first targets. Remember, I thought we'd get to 210 on like a big break here, and it happened. There was a pullback, but it's super minor, and then it just keeps going. So at this point, I'm kind of like, you know, a little bit indifferent on it. I feel like start getting rid of some of these extra lines that I've got. I don't really need them. It's just extra stuff, squiggly stuff on the chart. They're more like local daily stuff, so I don't want to keep them forever and ever. So anywho, so like when I'm looking at this region, is it unreasonable to think that this could come back down and retest 207? No, it's absolutely not unreasonable. In fact, some might say it's even perhaps necessary, because at the very least you would expect there to be a check here at 211. So I'm gonna, again, I don't really even think it's going out on a limb to say that I really do believe that the move, as good as it is, as great as it is, could potentially just keep going. There's no saying that you have to like come back. But if we're overcooked on most time frames, and we are, going up to at least the daily and stuff, where would be a natural place to kind of come back to? Well, we already kind of drew this S curve out. We thought it would hit here sometime between today and really Friday. So that's already happened, which is good. So what remains is really just a couple other, you know, big picture S curves. I think that this is an M cross, needs to come back down. I think it makes way more sense to go ahead and do that now than to try to do it later. If we just keep advancing, we could end up with some really steep retracements later. So the healthiest market move, in my opinion, that we could make right now would be to head back towards 207 and go ahead and get this creek jump out of the way. I really do think that would be the best. And then we could advance. And you might say, well, maybe that's just because that's what you wanted to see, you know? Well, yeah. But I mean, of all the charts that we've done recently, this one has probably been the most frustrating for how long it took, but ultimately it's performed kind of the best. Like in terms of local price targets, this is where we thought we would be by like mid-July. So I'm not gonna just throw everything else out and say that, oh, I don't think it could do anything, you know, negative now. Now that it's going, it's just gonna keep going. I mean, it could, but there's always that chance of just massive bullish whatever. I'm gonna start cleaning this up a bit because I don't want to keep all this other stuff on the chart. But I think that at this point, it's probably wise to just sort of take it as it is and say, all right, well, if it met the target that you were going for, so you can see here on this cross trend, this is the midpoint here, this is the high. Did it meet the target? Yep, certainly it did. Is this a historic level where we could find resistance right around 218? Yes. This makes sense because when we first entered this area, this is where it rejected, and then it came back down, really started rejecting around 214 and then went up to 218. Came all the way back down. In this case, it came down to like 204, but really it's this pocket region here, right? And it just has to do with the setup. And we haven't yet checked it as support. Once you check it as support, the good news is like that's another potential huge area to buy in, because if you can check this as support, then you should just cruise all the way to the top of this range. There won't be a great need to stop except for maybe like the middle. So you could see how like we've already traded this area. This would be the two zones that you might trade in over here, you know, and that's it. And so once you can kind of get to this area, if you can get to that pullback, I genuinely think this is where you're going to get like that massive move.
Look behind you.
She got something metal. You have toys. She's like, I don't know where they are. They have eluded me. I looked everywhere for them. I could not find them. That's not my fault, cat.
What?
Nothing. Just messing around. So, I would like to see a pullback. I know you guys are like, don't say those things, Booksy. I would though. I think this is a healthy M cross, 1, 2, down again. I think it would be a really healthy, really good retracement. Obviously, I want to buy back in again. That's always going to be part of it. I just think that there's also that's my bias, right? But then I also just think there's a general like massive wave here. I don't think it's as steep as some other folks may think it is. Could it be steeper, Booksy, and just keep going? Yeah. I mean, it just depends on your outlook, I guess. I think it's going to hit 252. I think it's going to do it. But I think that what we want to see right now going into August, what would be better for the health of IWM isn't to continue to extend indefinitely. That's my opinion. I think we really need to get this check out of the way. And I'd like to do it now. I would not like to do it after we hit like 227 or something. It would be a big pullback. Some of you are like, bring it on. Don't do that. No, ma'am. Some of you are like, bring it on, man. Just short it back down. Again, I'm just saying. Is this like really positive to me? Yeah. So preferably we top off somewhere here between here and like, let's say 220, and then come back down and build a bottom here around 207, and then we just advance. And then we don't look back again, you know what I mean? It's a simple, like, break, run kind of thing from that point forward. So that would be really positive. I genuinely think. This would also confirm a creek cross. It would confirm a support level that's really important long term. There's just a lot of good things that would come from a pullback right here. So I'll tell you this much. The only way I'm thinking the only way that I'm really wrong about this is if IWM, aside from like maybe a slight couple day delay here, hasn't really been that off. I think that the only way I'm really off about this setup is if this S curve is actually much faster, in which case I don't know if it goes as high. It may not go up to 252. It might be more like the 230 level before a bigger retracement back down. So at this point, I think it's advancing, but I just think that we need to get that pullback. Maybe there'll be some kind of negative catalyst news or something. I don't know. Some of y'all are like, dude, you're way early. It's going to be way up. I'll tell you this. I'll keep trying to like go back and forth against myself. If it manages to hold support over 218, then I don't see another stopping point until like 230. So there's not really much else here to look at. So I'm going to like just kind of keep it simple and just say like there's only really two stopping points If it can get above this 220 area, it's probably going to go up to about 227. I'm just giving you those rounded estimates, but that's sort of it. I don't really see it where else you go, you know. So I'm not just bearish because I exited a chunk of my position. I'm really not. I'm still holding some of my position. It's just more about the reason I exited is because I thought this was probably a probable top for us. So still nothing to really say on AMC other than it rejected. So it rejected off of this creek irrefutably. I mean, it kind of hit it right on the mark and then rejected down. So it's going to face an uptrend here. I've got it drawn different ways on different charts. So potentially, if it can hold right where it's at, it's in good shape to advance. Could be kind of like what we saw with GME, like a little creek back up this morning here to find support, potentially. And then beyond that, maybe, I don't know, maybe down lower at like 520, but I think if it breaks low here, there's a stronger chance it's pretty weak. So I know those are pennies apart, but it doesn't look, this is a tight structure, so there's not really a lot of room. So pennies apart really is the difference between a creek support and a creek breakdown. There's not a lot of space here. So really it's, and we talked about this big picture this morning. I just want to keep repeating the same thing so that folks that are coming and going are aware of what I'm looking for. This is either like a simple ABC correction or it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a fifth wave is where you're going to get that, I think, that attempt for the breakdown and going towards the gap. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, though, because sometimes that could mean that once it's sort of checked off and out of the way, you can just go. So the way this is set up, if we get that creek, it's going to look like a head and shoulder for most people, but I actually think that the head and shoulder is rising, and I think that's actually the completed head and shoulder. So I think that motion is done on that breakdown. So again, coming back below here, 522, that's like a 50% drop from that head length. So I think you're looking at that as a highly probable target at 504 or 505. That's really a good place, in my opinion, to be, because the head and shoulders finished and you're on a macro head and shoulder inversion, which gives you a big probable chance of a break here with continuation. And we've done the we've done some targets, and there's definitely a strong target pretty high up in the 6s, around 660, and then 755. Those are the two markers I would look at. So I kind of wonder about this guy. Where's that going? It's because that shoulder came low. It's going to be some kind of a resistance spot right here. 650. Yeah. MPW. Yeah, it's pushing. I have a marker that, sorry, I just didn't even like come back to it. I told you I would, and I just kind of ignored it. There was an alert that I had set. So it should be coming above the 1 hour. Yep. The 1 hour is right at 458. So it's above the hourly EMA. It's currently pushing the top at 561. Top was at 561. So it's trying. I don't see any kind of gaps on the hourly. There was a small gap on like the 30-minute down here. I think it was just the creek jump though. So, yeah, maybe that's it. We may not need to come low, and it hit the little liquidity pocket. I'm really just waiting for this thing to come alive. I know it sounds weird because you're like, well, it's already moved pretty far. I mean, if you caught this bottom, you made good money. Yeah, but it won't be in a massive, huge move until, again, this creek breaks, and it's doing it right on the bottom here, which is great. So there's this particular spot that I marked off. Let me see if I make sure it's the same thing. I want to give you guys the number again. I think I put an alert there. Yeah, it's right at 468. And I think that's where this kind of might have a really significant kind of takeoff point, because it's really where the range, if you look at the sideways motion down here, it's really where it starts building out support. It's right there. It's the first entry support. So everything from like 555 up to that 568 is all a giant support region. And if we can recapture that here, after jumping this creek down and the hourly moving average, this should just be like an explosive move. I know that's saying a lot, but I genuinely don't know why it wouldn't be, because it would be like, I mean, we could see this thing potentially just go right back up to the top really quick. I genuinely think it's likely. There's a 575 SOS target that I had, but it's paired with a gap up here. See this? Do you see this gap? This is so like, this is such a rich setup in so many ways. And then you can see like the, that as a resistance level, right, previously. So like, you can tell like the distance between this historic support level, which again also recaptures this uptrend. I mean, there's so many things here. See that orange? And you can see how that matches. I mean, it just kind of matches. Everything matches out really well. This orange ascending channel for a build out here that just pushes you up. And if we kept on that, I love this kind of stuff because the waves are just all knowing, completing as they would. And you can see here that first mark we hit, you guys are like, I can't see jack squat in your chart, Booksy. Your chart's a hot mess. There's too many lines, Booksy. There's too many lines. And I'll try to get rid of some of them. This red one's not as important. This one's not as important. This one's not important. I'm trying my best. Hopefully you can see enough here to know what I'm seeing. So you see this orange channel? So we came back and we hit first of all, we hit a big golden pocket retracement. Second of all, this orange channel, if it continues to break out, does so right here, which just so happens to be this great intersection of all kinds of fun stuff, right? We've got massive amounts of historic supports in this region, right in this pocket. So it's insane, but there's just like so many intersections all in one spot here that I think it's going to be pretty explosive, again, in a good way. If it can kind of breach this little intersection. You can see that. I'm trying to mark it off a little bit better. I should make it the right color, but whatever. Try to make them like all sort of more dense so you can see it on the chart better. I know it's usually like worse, but I'm trying to make a point here. So you see that intersection? Then the next marker is up here. So it's like really concise. And there's a gap. So if you're like, oh, there's a gap up there? Yeah, they left a gap right up top at like 575. And then check out this zone. See that? So there's this huge travel distance from about 467 up to 561 that could be met with like a single bound. I'm not saying it will be, but yeah, that's correct. Titleist guy, you're correct. So it's the 618 retracement. I'm getting a lot of lag on my stream. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. See if that helps. So I don't know. It's going on in and out here, but hopefully that helped a little bit. Keeps giving me warnings, but whatever. Yeah, the golden pocket, it's traditionally like the 618 to 65, and it's just a statistically very likely place of retracement, like a high likelihood. There's usually more than one reason it is. And in this case, it was set up as the creek retest. So that's probably the bigger reason. That's not always the case, but so I'm trying to make this as abbreviated as possible. So I know you guys want to watch other things all the time, but this is a really clean setup for a potential move. So if we can get above like 480, I think there's a strong chance you're going to move almost $1, and you'll move that pretty quick because you shouldn't need to trade this anymore very much. And then I think that marks a potential halfway point. There's another one going up here that we've only tested once. And this is where I'm like really hanging my hat at the moment, because the next move after that, this ends up being like a really clean kind of 50-50 swing from one to the next. The next move after that goes up to like $7 to $8. And what's cool about this is that when you look at the big picture, it's finally like jumping that macro creek. So that gives me a whole lot of, I don't know what the word, I don't want to be like a hippie, but like positive vibes. Like there's a good setup there. I don't know how high it goes from there. I've done some estimation based on the breakdown over here, and I think it's possible, when you look at the build out, it's possible we could see it go all the way up to 850. And that to some degree makes some sense because of a macro wave form that's up here. So I think at highest it's 850. I think lower end it's probably only 7. That's a big range, but that's just kind of like the bottom of this previous range. It's right here. You can see why that makes some sense. So is it going to be easy to know? I don't know. Maybe when we get there we'll find out. I think it'll be fairly straightforward. You know, if we get to that point, yeah, I don't know what to do from there. I just think there's a strong likelihood that it could go almost all the way up to 850 on the first run. But low end, maybe 7. So I've been sort of bouncing back and forth on targets on this one, but I still think that these are kind of the best targets. I haven't really changed them very much at all in the last several months. So initial push, okay, that's like a halfway point for a bigger part of this wave, in my opinion, because really the 1618 on this goes all the way up to $14. Now, some of you guys are like already annoyed because you're like, oh, I don't want to hear about those. I want to hear about AMC and GME. And every time I talk about other stocks, you get kind of perturbed. But I want to encourage you to like remember that the stock market has more than just AMC and GME. I understand your investment in it. I'm invested in it too. But I almost always lose a lot of viewers every time I talk about some of these other charts. And I'm like, I want to chart what you guys want to chart too, but I also feel like there's a lot of really good plays out there. So I try to give them all a chance if I can. If I have time, I'll look at them. All right. IWM's just pushing. Volume is dropping. It's almost back down to average volume. It's still early in the day, so we'll see. It could come up quite a bit, be above average by the end of the day. I don't know what to tell you guys, except that it's already kind of like done the divergence thing. Like it's like you can kind of just wait and wait and wait for a top. At this point, it could be as high as 220. I don't expect, again, it to stay that way forever, though. I don't think that it's going to just keep going up right now. But that's my opinion. You are more than welcome to disagree, and you might say, "Dude, it's just getting going. It's going to keep going." Golden pocket is 0.5. Kind of like there's people that say it's 0.5 because it's a 50% retracement, and then they'll say it goes 0.5 down to 618. But look up the golden pocket, and the ratio itself is 618 to 6.5. So there's a difference of opinion across the market. Right or wrong, all of those are good retracements. So I don't usually bat an eye if it goes to 618 or 6.5. I usually think that's a really good retracement. But some folks will just say it's the 0.5. And I'm genuinely telling you that it's both, because like go look it up, go Google it. You'll find both answers. Some people say it's 0.5 to 6.2. Some people say it's 6.2 to 6.5. Just we don't have to like argue about it because it's both. Like they both are there. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. You can go look it up. You'll find answers that deviate. I don't know why exactly. There's no universal agreement. What I like to see is some kind of a range build out between the 618 and the 6.5 with a possible low extension down to 6.5. Those tend to be really good retracements. And then it's stock to stock. So some stocks are going to have more preference for a 0.5. Your more bullish stocks like the 0.5s. Whereas a lot of them will, frankly, they'll just be constantly hitting like 618 or lower. Oh, it's not taken from YouTube. No, I don't. I used to, but people started using it to try to get to my personal information, which frankly is their choice. That's one way to live your life, is just invade people's privacy, I guess. And I found that to be really disrespectful to my family, so I decided to get rid of it. So I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Is it out? I'd say so. It's trying. It jumped the creek here at 26.60. It made a pretty decent advancement to 27. It's up 3.5%. It's not really much to say about it just yet. I don't really feel like that is a huge move. I really think it can go way farther. So I'm still kind of just waiting for that bigger advancement. So I suppose at this point, I just want to see it find support somewhere above the creek here at 26.60. And if we can find support above 26.60, we should be in good shape. So. And IWM's to 218, so it's pushed up to that top area. We'll see. It's odd to think that if IWM was topping, that somehow like these guys we were running. So maybe I'm wrong about one or the other. Maybe they're just all going together finally. I mean, in reality, they're all up about 3% across my charts here. So I don't know, 2.5, 3%. Glad I held some of those calls. I don't even know what to do with them now. Just keep them forever. Should have just kept the ones from this morning. I had a feeling it was going to go higher than this mark here. It's okay. The more I charted it, the more I was like, oh yeah, you can go up to like 218 or 220. So those were August strikes for, so I cut it close, you know. Those are August strikes for 230. So I mean, like, I definitely cut it really close. Now they're up almost 600%, which is great. I kind of lost a lot of profit by selling off a lot earlier, but hard to argue with 600% gains, you know, regardless. It is what it is. It's a good trade. First gains I made were like, I mean, it's crazy how different it became within a matter of an hour. This is difference. It's like a 40% difference, but percentage-wise, it's a huge difference. So now they're almost $2 a piece. I bought them for like under 30 cents. It's a good trade. I don't know. I mean, really, AMC still hasn't broken yet. It's still kind of stalling out. So, I mean, maybe IWM is going to make another big leg here. I don't really know. I mean, it's obviously overbought. That's easy enough to see. All the way up to the daily. The highest locally it's been overbought is a 78. It could go farther. Right now it's sitting at 75, so it's pretty close. Huge candle, but the volume looks really weak candle to candle here. So either there's just not a lot of selling and buyers just easily pushing the stock price, or it is getting weaker and we're about to get dumped on. You got to remember, like, as much as I love seeing green, this day is only half over. I mean, you could end this day with basically a complete reversal if sellers step in at a particular level. So I'm trying my best to give you the most like high probability areas. I still think beyond the 216 region and 217 region, which we already talked about, which was right here as a possible top, that has more to do with my S-curve measurements, right, than anything else. Beyond those, the only other thing I can really see is like about 218 to 220, there was a historic spot of resistance from like the original 2021 range, and that's kind of the only place I can really see as a hard stop point. There's also an intersection I have at like 220, like on the dot, so up here. And that was in like Wednesday. So maybe it's like I kind of got it, maybe I have it a little bit backwards. Maybe there's a backup and then there's a final move or something like there. You know what I mean? Like could be a little bit more of a secondary top. And that's when it finally loses maybe perhaps that trend we were looking at earlier. I think I deleted them for some reason. I need to bring those back. But I don't know. And beyond that, if it can get above there, I think it can go up to like 230 pretty fast. So killer play, you know, really killer play, really good, really good. This was definitely the best play of the month so far for me. Maybe the best is yet to come. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, now my calls are up to like 600%, so pretty great.
Are you almost done?
Almost.
What's my time?
We'll see. Let me get off a little early. It's been a pretty slow day, so.
Did you fart?
No, I'm just waving because the cattail was whacking me. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with this. I think I might go ahead and exit my positions. This would probably end up with some kind of midday slump regardless, and then if there was a need, if there was a secondary move, maybe we'd get it, but I don't know. Pretty happy with these. That's a big breakout candle. I think we just really want to see that retest and then go. So I probably won't re-enter unless it comes back down to 207. Or if it finds support high up here, maybe I'll re-enter. But that's about the only two places I would re-enter right now. I feel like we need to get a wave cross. So I'm happy. I'm happy with it. I think I'm satisfied with those moves. I'm just going to let it be what it is. So I'm out of IWM for now. We'll see how it goes. And if you're somebody that still wants to continue in it, I would just suggest, again, marking off 220 and then probably 227 is the next one way up there. That would be huge if it made that move. Huge, huge, huge. Yeah, I don't know. It could go there. I'll say this much. If it does go there, that's probably going to be a pretty massive retracement. So if it does go there, we might be coming way, way down. And if I went there, I might even consider selling. I don't know, maybe even consider selling calls or something. Because I bet you that IV would be jacked. It's still strong. Don't get me wrong. I just want to see that retracement. I just don't like this AMC stuff. It seemed like this wicked above right here and then failed to make any advancement. So I don't know what to make of that. Maybe it didn't. Maybe I've got my lines drawn a little off. Need to be more precise about it. No, it didn't. Okay. Never mind. Never mind. Did not wick above it. I am drawn a little off. I'm on the 30 minutes, so it might have been the difference in like a time frame thing. 30 minute on both of these. Let's go down to 6. Let me see if that's where I drew it. No, it's definitely meeting it right now. So Yeah, so we'll see. It's struggling a little bit. Still kind of acting like this is supply right now. You can see the up thrust through here. They're making higher lows, which is fine. That's a bullish move, but the up thrusts are not really making strong advancements. They're just kind of stuck. So support over 532 could give you that move pretty quickly. If we can build out here, it's just got to get the support it needs. So we'll see. Local SOS potentially for GME as well. I guess I'm really looking at a possible move up to like the 31 area. I mean, this is different time frames. This kind of makes it look like it would happen today. This may be more into tomorrow, but these are both big moves. Like, even though this looks like it's just straight up and this looks like it's chopping, it's the same amount of time. It's just a thought about how the market might react to this first move and have like a pullback, for example, and then build out into a second move. And that could happen all today, and it could still get to that $31 mark. You know, if it were to do that, it's questionable. I still think there's a possibility that here it doesn't advance again, in which case it comes back down. So you just kind of got to watch it every level, see what happens. But so far so good. It's making the moves up, so it's greener. You know, that's what's important, I guess. I would say that the options are not necessarily better. Mine haven't really grown very much. That breakout changed it a little bit, pushed the needle. But it hasn't been, it just barely moved green today, finally. So we got a ways to go on these. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is like halfway up the structure. I'm done when I'm done.
I know, I'm just watching.
Okay. I feel like this is like halfway. So yeah, there's a lot of connection right now to this level. This is a pretty decent mark at 31.30. Not sure why that number specifically. There was a support build on it back here, but not really sure why else that would be significant. Yeah, it's a strong enough acceleration that I'd consider it a decent possibility here. So usually once you get close to the trend, things start accelerating, and I'm seeing that acceleration across the mark here. You can see it built out from back yonder. So it looks like that's the first big move here. It's the 31.31. So I might I might go ahead and average down on this one. I've got some cash on hand. I think it's going to try to make the move. I guess we'll find out. If I can get the order filled. Yeah, let's see what we can do. Might do 2 orders and go ahead and meet the ask. So I can get a lower number. Somebody's asking for like way higher, spreading it out on this particular one I'm looking at. And it's bugging me, but I'll meet their order and see if it drops. Give me my second one. Oh, somebody else did it. Yes. Well, it says that. We'll find out. Oh, good. Drop the price. Somebody was up there trying to build the spread out. And their ask was way above the bids. So I absorbed one of them and it brought the whole thing down. I got the price I wanted. I'll buy it. I'll take that silly contract if it gets you out of my way. Could just be patient, but I got good prices on that, so I'm happy. I'll leave it at that. This guy. No, I don't have any of that stuff, Matt. Sorry. If you don't want to do the YouTube thing, then don't worry about it, you know. It really doesn't have to be, it's not a paid service, you know what I mean? If you make money on the plays, great, but it's your trades, you know. If it's about the learning process, that's cool. I can respect that. You know, obviously, if you have a mentor or a teacher that you're learning from, you want them to feel valued. I feel the same way about like my martial arts instructors and stuff. Like I want them to know that I value their instruction and pay them for it, you know, or offer whatever I can to help. But you know, it's not nothing here is compulsory, so appreciate it. Maybe think about it. I've been thinking about maybe doing the membership thing because that's one way that some people might want to do it, and that way it's like a low cost that's more continuous, like really low. And then if you really are, it's free. It wouldn't be like you can always come here and just watch the stream. It's always free. The Discord is free too. As long as you're like there for TA, you can be there. You're not there to cause drama. You get kicked out if you cause drama. But like somebody mentioned the membership stuff, and I'm not really for it in terms of like, oh, I just want to make money off people, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what I could offer, but what I was thinking about was I might use that as a way to help with another kind of mission that I have, and I would obviously make this known to people. I don't know how I could like prove that I'm using it for the right things, because that's always a difficult thing to do, but I've been really talking a lot about, and not everybody believes in the same thing that other people believe in, but I've been really talking about how I want to help um, those who can't afford to do martial arts to be able to do it. I think it's a really powerful method of building confidence for people that lack confidence, and also building humility for people who have maybe too much confidence, and in a way of kind of giving people direction for like the physical, especially kids and younger people who get into fights a lot. Um, it's a lot cheaper to get people like that into like a boxing gym and or a martial arts gym and give them that outlet than to have them fighting on the street and get put in jail or prison. And that costs like 40 grand a year to keep somebody in prison. I mean, it's absurd. So I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I don't know how I can help because I'm like limited, everybody's got limited resources and limited capabilities. So my idea was I could do some kind of a nonprofit using a skill set I do have. And I've really only got two skill sets that I can use. One is the stock market, and the other is, and maybe teaching in the stock market is a possibility. And then one is doing the artistic stuff. So I've been building up resources to do the artistic stuff. And what I found is that there's not really anybody else doing this, at least in my state, that I could find. There's no such thing as like a martial arts scholarship for martial arts. Like, it's, if you have a scholarship, it's for going to college or something, and playing on a collegiate team or something like that. But I'm thinking about something more like a way of partnering with like schools to do scholarship opportunities for people who are unable to afford it, because it's probably one of the more affordable things you can do in life. I mean, if you look at like baseball and football and all the costs that go into that, it's really expensive to get a kid into a youth league and buy all the equipment and do all the stuff. It's actually considerably cheaper to do martial arts, but people still look at the cost and they think it's a big hurdle because they're like, well, I can just buy a gym membership for $10 a month. Like, why would I pay 100 plus a month or whatever for, well, it's different. First of all, no one's there to help you really in the gym, not usually, unless you have a personal trainer. And a gym is a gym, like you're there to use the equipment, and that's kind of it. With martial arts, you're learning like a system, you're learning skills, and ultimately you're buying into that resource pool. So like our martial arts school has like 6 different locations. Like you can go to any one of them. You could take 3 or 4 classes a day if you had the time, and you really could stretch that money to be like almost work for you're ripping people off. I mean, essentially, and really only the instructors are getting paid. So it's not really like a super lucrative business for anybody. So I was thinking about how, like, if it's really a big deal, because I've seen people that just stopped going to the classes because of inflation, and like their parents or whatever, like suddenly couldn't afford it. If they were younger or if they were older, it's like they had medical complications and like suddenly they couldn't afford it. Things like that happen. And I'd love to be able to provide like an extra month for somebody or whatever if they want to do that. And it can be completely anonymous. I don't need my name on it. That's not important to me. But just to have that opportunity would be really great for people. And I think my skill set could make it happen if I want it to happen. So I'm going to try to make it happen. So I've been thinking about, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I just want to tell you why, because I was thinking about things like memberships and stuff on YouTube and whether or not that could be used for something like that. And I would obviously make that known. So if people were like, well, I don't want to support that for some reason, they're like, I don't want to support that, then okay, you know what I mean? Then you don't have to. But that way it's not like I'm just like lining my pockets or something. Like there's a good reason for it. There'd have to be a good reason for it. So We'll see. I think being creative and how you do good things is important in life. Like, not just that you have to be like a creative person, but just to be creative in how you accomplish positive goals. So that's sort of what I'm thinking lately. We'll see. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm still working out some kinks. There's issues with that, like with anything. You'd have to figure out how to avoid people like taking a advantage of that system, and that could be a lot of things. That could be schools themselves, like just pocketing the money, or like you have to have ways of ensuring that it's going to the right place. Obviously, there's plenty of risk involved. Yeah, so it's tricky. Maybe it's some kind of like a token system. But it's difficult. I don't know. There's things about it that could go wrong. I'm mostly concerned about like the fake places, like they call them McDojos, where it's like a bunch of fake martial artists just doing a racketeering thing. That's the place I'm like most concerned about. Is like there's not really any easy way to kind of build credibility in the martial arts world, because technically if like nobody knows the tradition you come from, you could just say you're a black belt in that tradition or something and start a school, and that's dangerous. There's people that do that and they are legitimately not good and they just fake it, you know what I mean? The organization I'm in is not at all like that, and has a really good history, and people are legit, and they're really good people and they work hard, and you got to earn it. But there's a lot of places that are kind of a rip-off, So I know 3 places. The 3 places that I've attended are all kind of in the same area, and those all 3 would be great places. So one is the boxing gym, one is the taekwondo, and the other is, well, it's kind of a mixed martial arts, and then the other is the kung fu, and all those places are good. I would be willing to partner with those schools for sure if they would take me. So yeah, we'll see. Time will tell. Man, I really messed up this chart. This chart's like a mess. Rumble this week, says Suzanne. that's like an old school way of saying Susan. Suzanne. I think Suzanne is with an E, isn't it? It's like Suze and then A-N-N-E, Suzanne, as opposed to Susan. So I said your name wrong. Sorry. Susan? Suzanne's one of those names. I just did it again. I can't say Susan. I keep saying Suzanne. Yeah, I can do that, Frank. Can you check Siri and her costs? Yeah, you've said that a couple times. I kind of saw the comment and then I meant to come back to it. So apologies. I really wasn't ignoring you. I just hadn't come back to it. So costs went on a kind of a rage blow up here, and I don't know if my chart's gonna build out again. I guess it is. So yeah, this is what I thought may occur if it reached certain highs. I said highest at 32, but we had marked off Man, these levels look really good too. They still look like they're really good. We marked off this level and this level. So both of these ended up being really good levels to mark. You can see the rejections there and there. I'm not a big fan of moves like this chasing. So like when someone brought it to my attention, I think it might have been Shaw, the push up, I think it was like right around here. I mean, you could have entered and still made 100%, but I didn't enter the play. I thought it was a little too risky, a little too risk on, because I couldn't really tell exactly where it might go. And I think the estimate that I had ended up probably being the best estimate, which was the $18 one. I didn't think it would necessarily go up here, although I did draw it that way. So the rest of this would still follow much the same. I think that there's a strong chance after this kind of a move to the upside that you're going to chop back down. Frankly, there's really no reason you wouldn't come all the way back down to like 5 unless it's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're not going to come back below 670. So there's 2 spots I would be watching. I would basically watch from 5. I know there's a gap there. But I would actually be watching from 550 up to 6 to 7. Let's just say 550 to 7. And then from there you can just use fibs, but I imagine that it's going to respect this trend that I drew up. I don't know why I drew it that way. Maybe I was just imagining what it would look like, but it should be tighter. I'm not sure why I have it way over there. That's all I'm saying. I don't know. Maybe I was using extended hours or something. I have no idea. So yeah, I would imagine this is some kind of an S-curve. It could end up being like a shallow S-curve where it kind of stops out and builds out high and then comes down later into like earnings or something like that. It's pretty rare that if this is like a 1, 2, 3, I think it'd be pretty rare that this just continued to just go. It's not impossible. It's just unusual. And I feel like we don't normally see that. So the way I would observe this is that it probably already met the marks that it was going to meet. I mean, it made a 1414 extension almost perfectly. So, you know, it doesn't have to go to the 1618. That's not a rule. I guess if it came back up, that's a logical place for it to go, would be 22, because that's another, looking back, that's another historic support and resistance level. All of these are. So, I mean, there's possibility there if it found a second life and just kind of took off. My expectation would be that this first move probably builds out a support. There's a liquidity gap right here around 750. I'm going to guess that it builds out over top of it. It's just a hunch. And then there's a higher amount of selling and buying liquidity going up to about 1060. So if it has like a second reaction, I think it'll go up there. But this is how I would imagine it playing out, is something like that. And then maybe you can get another leg. This could be quite boring. You know, this could end up being a bit long-winded, as wave 4 usually is. And then the last wave may only go up to like 22. September, October. And that's assuming we don't get a kind of like a breakdown here, which I also think is possible. That's my thought on costs. Siri, a lot of people ask me about this one. Sirius XM. Honestly, I don't think I've ever charted it, so this will be the first. High volume, right, for that little pocket. This is a weird chart. Were there any like reverse splits on this or anything? I don't think there was, but or splits on it. I'm gonna put a pin in that for now. Focus on that. So to answer your question about Frank about going back through an AMC chart, the lines that I'm using are kind of what I'm doing here, which is I'm developing what I call like cross sections, which have to do with waves, wave analysis. So this is a wave up, right, and then down. It's pretty straightforward, right? So that's one move. And normally when we're thinking about waves, we're thinking about, of course, arcs, but the market doesn't typically move that neatly. So even though there is a wave here, it may not look, very perfect, depending on how you draw it out. It may be very kind of clustered, right? But what I look for is like a little bit odd. I mean, what I look for is specifically like simple, straightforward things, like up, down, and then where was the last support and where are the last resistances. So early on, this guy has a support bottom here, and then I would say that most of the time, though not all the time, there's what I call like a cross section, which is there's a 50% marker between the top and the bottom. What this has to do with is sine wave theory, which is just math. Mathematics, this is not me, this is just waves. So if you're like thinking this is some kind of like Booksy exclusive, it's not. It's just my observation of what math is already there, which is this is normally how we see it play out in channels. If you have a really perfect channel with a stock and you can identify the top and bottom of the channel, that'd be like here and here, then you can identify the halfway point and you can go from the previous bottom and you could identify the next hit on the channel and like where it is. It's a way of timing out hits on a channel. So you find that there's these kind of interesting little tidbits, like if you divide this in half and you go from bottom through the half, top through the half, you'll find that that's the center of the wave. Naturally, again, talking about this in terms of a channel, if you know the top and the bottom of the channel, this can give you like the next hit timing wise. It's not perfect, but it's usually pretty close if it's a solid channel. So one of the things that I like to note is that this isn't usually straight. So this is usually a curve. So what happens if the initial push is kind of shallow, like in this case, right? The initial push goes up, but then instead of going down to here, like halfway, it goes really low. What does that mean? Well, usually, but not always, it's kind of like a most of the time kind of thing. Usually that 50% rule still applies. So you don't typically get like a perfect wave. So if it ends up going low and you know that it's jumped the creek, as we call it, meaning it's already jumped the downward resistance that was going down, then this wave is complete. It's made a down move, up move, it's made its down move. Basically, it's a tilted wave. It's tilted downward, right? So at this point, could it be that there's a trend here? Yeah, but I think it was broken. I think you can see the trend here and the trend here, basically the creek. So in this case, it's basically like it was already in a trend down and then it broke out. So then what I could do is maybe use something like the 50% rule and determine like, well, where did it go? Did it go above that 50% or did it stay below it, roughly? And that can help you determine like where the next top is. So you're basically just creating a sine wave from thin air using trajectories. So I already know where the top is in this case, at least locally, because it's right here. We already saw it happen. So I don't need to like guess a lot about it. But I will say this, and I think it's kind of obvious. If you look at the midline actually seems a lot closer to here, which is this little dip that happened. Do you see this massive spike in volume? right there, and then this massive kind of wave in the middle of this structure on the RSI. I think that's the middle. Like, and it is. Timing wise, we know it because we just measured it. We already know it's the middle. But I think that's the middle of the wave. I don't think it's just the middle of like this downward cycle. So then what I can do is kind of structure a wave more or less based on that as a middle. And I don't know exactly timing wise what should have happened, but I think it could be that simple like that. This is a very flat wave. And then if you look at the middle here, you can see like that's the place it dropped off from. So the answer is right there. Like that's as far as you really need to go, and I'll tell you why in a second. But this right here is the breakdown. So now ignoring like the 50-50 stuff, because we don't really need that as much, we've got a pretty strong indication that that's the middle of the wave. So then the question is, did this lay up on top of, after jumping the creek, did it lay up on top of that wave structure? And the answer is, yeah, it did. And we think that it's possible that it could be forming like a new wave because it technically jumped over it. So the one thing that, again, the sine wave that I just showed you, the one thing it doesn't show is it doesn't show a breakout. But we know that if a wave forms, it generates what I call like a cross, which is usually like there's an upward momentum here, and then there's some kind of downward momentum here. And oftentimes what happens if the wave is kind of bearish is we get stuck here, we just never break the creek, or when we do advance, we get stuck pretty low. It's close, almost looks like it did it. It's hard to, you could argue maybe it did because it's sort of flattened out. But you might get stuck there and then you'd go back down and the wave would be low. So in our case, where would that be? Pretty far down, right? It would be like probably way down here because you can see like it bought in real low. So if it broke through there, and it's possibly happening, you know, you can see it. It's struggling right on there. That's why you're getting this high amount of volume, right? Hence the idea of a creek dropping beneath a support, right? I think it's a wave support. I don't think it's much else except for high liquidity, obviously center mark. Yeah, that could be a problem because you could see how that wave might need to curve back down, in which case you come back really low. And that's usually when I default to like supports and junk. Like, okay, well, there's a support here from previously, and you could probably manage to hold that, and that would be like your creek retest. We could find if there's any trajectories there. But something interesting happens if it breaks above both. And this is where you get advancement, because if it can manage to break above both, sometimes if it's very horizontal, what this ends up becoming is like a SOS, where it goes above the top and then it comes back and does a creek check. If it's like this, where it's not quite horizontal, it could become what's called an LPS, the last point of support, where it's actually going to advance further. So right now, the way this is set up, it's a little bit of a mixed bag because it held resistance here on the intersection. So I would say that this intersection is very critical. So it's kind of stuck between two hard spots, right? So right now, probably if you were to read like the pundits or whatever, they would say like the support is somewhere between like $3 and $7 because they're looking at this range. There's probably some other stuff we need to look at with like EMAs. I haven't really gotten there yet. 180. That's the 90. Where's the 180? Yeah, I mean, this is a long chart, so that's a weekly. Oh, I forgot the Bollinger Band too. This is a fun one. We don't need that though. So we're below it. So, you know, like right now, then you can start doing what we call like iteration, and that's where you're like, all right, I see the big picture. There's a potential breakdown here if it doesn't hold, but it seems like to me anyway, excuse me, sneezed. It seems like to me that it's trying to hold this trend, and I might need to adjust it. I usually kind of abandon the whole, it has to be perfectly 50%. I don't think that's true. I usually try to find the line that makes the most sense. This one makes more sense to me because I can see the rejection on it right here at 207, the support back here. So this is the one I think I would go with. So right now I think it's trying to hold that support. Potentially, if this support holds, so then I could look at this as a range. If we find support here, it breaks a local creek, right? And then that's a spring, and then you could have it find support, and then it goes into an SOS. You can see how this quickly like leads you up back to the top. And then to confirm that, we could look at some other things like is there a cross trend upward for a new wave? Like is this a new wave that's going to be pushing higher? I think I drew it earlier because usually when you get a wick like this, it's sort of maybe the part of a waveform that's forming, you know, and I don't know. This is one of those things where you get into like some weird theory stuff that I've kind of done myself, and I don't want to overdo it, but maybe this right here. This looks like another good one. So it seems to be like an indication that as we were breaking down, the powers that be, so to speak, were building out wave structures. And this seems to be that there's some kind of a target in mind, directional target in mind here of 1350. Granted, looks like it's farther off, but it's probably that level. And this was the support from 1998, I guess. So lots could happen between now and then, you know? So it depends on how you want to trade it. If you just wanted to know, like, well, could it go up? Sure. I mean, there's divergence right here on these two bottoms. Bottom, bottom went lower. Bottom, bottom went higher. It looks like it's positioned to go up. Short term, we'd just be looking at, like, simple stuff like the creek locally, and this is where I talk about iterations, which is you'll see some similar patterning on like fractals in a smaller time frame. 4 hour looks like it's ready to go back down, but we know that the weekly is really strong, so we might need to go into the middle, check the daily. A little bit more room to go, so we could see a move out and then probably back down to check the creek. That would make sense. I'm just kind of averaging the thoughts, right, between the three. So then I would just look at this locally. I think it looks pretty similar to what I'm seeing here. So I know this idea of iteration might be a bit odd to people, but it comes from what I see as like a fractal analysis understanding of like how things tend to build out. And so what I would say is iteratively, this looks really similar here. I didn't do it far enough. This looks pretty similar to what we're seeing on like the small scale, like there. And that to me is saying that they're sort of recycling a similar build out to some degree. So what I could do is then take that as part of the analysis. Like, all right, well, I know that in this wave, there's a really important trend here. That's probably a cross trend, right? Where it's coming across this like 50-50 or something. I don't exactly know how it's going to get there, but this looks about right. It's about halfway over. I know that it did this on the big picture too. I had this big M-shaped breakdown, and then it broke back out. So maybe there's going to be something like that, where we get another big M shape, and then it breaks out and stays flat. Who knows? It's like speculative. But we already have levels of support and resistance. We already have levels right here that we can use at 630s. So yeah, it's just kind of like building it out from there. You can get really nitty gritty with it. I'll just say that. But what I would say is like using this and then comparing that to what we see down here. It seems like it's a similar setup. So I might say that those are likely going to run into each other at some point, and they do right over here. So I would say July 2026, that's way out in the future. There's probably going to be something important that happens over there. But yeah, so what happened here is it dropped below it, and then it raced up through it, and then went back down. So just like, it's sort of like a confirmation of what we already know might be true, was you could see this race up, just like this one did on the bigger scale, race back up. It goes back to the top. In our case, it's pretty high. It's like up here. And then races back down through it and tries to get a new low. I don't necessarily think this gets a new low. It could end up being a new low like way later, but I think it could be a rally and then potentially like a secondary rally in November. We'll see. This is a big chart, so none of this has to happen. It's just speculation right now. This I'm probably the least sure about. I don't know if it would just do it again. It seems like it's compressing pretty quick. So if it did do it again, you might have a pretty interesting setup. See, this actually comes back up. It's almost like an LSPY. So it'd be like us going down. See, this comes all the way down to the bottom. It goes a little lower. Yeah, maybe. It's almost like this. Like it would be some kind of like high compression zone. And then you'd have some kind of bigger build out. It's a really long-term chart, so it's hard to say. But if it were going to leave, that actually makes a lot of sense, because this would be like a spring. This would be a retest on the floor. And then this would be an SOS. So it tracks with Wyckoff. And I don't know. Everything else is a little more questionable, but you can go look at the chart and determine for yourself. But I would say this seems right to me if it can make those advances. And the other thing is, like, it might be tempting to say, like, oh, it hits this target at this particular time, but we don't know that for sure. And there could be a massive push up before it comes down. I mean, you could enter this target flat, down, up. It might be important in that way. It could end up being this massive move that then comes back down, you know. So I wouldn't focus too much on that. I focus mostly on this as a resistance, though, and just seeing this as like what it needs to be, which is like this is the resistance right here. So there's a creek. It can help to flip the chart. You can see it easily when you flip it. It's like, oh yeah, there's a support here. You don't necessarily know what's going to happen between now and then, but you could have a massive, you know, failure, and then this thing could end up going really low potentially one more time if some of these supports don't hold. I don't feel like it would go below like $1.50, but I mean, then just look at that. It basically looks like an inverted cat ear here, doesn't it? Like a paw, ear one, ear two. So it's just determine basically like what do you want, you know, what do you want for your trade, I guess. It's pretty steep right now. I feel like it could be, this could be a little bit of a mess up. This little wick to the upside could be screwing us up. Because there's another low-lying trend support that seems a little stronger. It's this one. When I flip it upside down, it's easier for me to see sometimes. Flip the chart. I feel like that one's pretty strong, like as a potential resistance. So, like again, this makes sense. But if it broke down again, Yeah, this makes sense too, because then this would be like an extension down. And then, yeah, I don't keep saying this makes sense, but sure. It gets easier as you do this longer. Usually you end up drawing it correctly and you're like, oh yeah, now it sort of works. Actually, that works pretty well. Keep it tight. And this could get you through, I don't know why I drew that so ridiculously low or high. Yeah, this could get you to this point. And then it's basically just like a cat ear. 1, 2, 3, 4. Four moves up. It's usually what it is. Then you get some kind of massive move, I would think. You break this line. Where does it go? It goes really far. I think it's here. See, there's like a bunch of resistance right here. There's actually support, but and then this is where it crossed down. I think it can go way up here, like $90 or something. That's as if it makes those moves. So long term could be a really, really positive play. But it has to make those bigger pushes, obviously, first. And honestly, that's actually kind of... It could be more like this. You guys are like, oh, it's going straight up. I think it's a good long-term move. So, yeah. It looks good. I would say my only major concern with this one is just losing here. I think losing this level could just send you into a really big, deep free fall. And I mean, you can see why. There's a lot riding on it. This is the same place that it dropped off before multiple times. So I think any kind of loss of that, maybe that's why this makes sense to me, is like coming back low one more time. Any kind of loss of that would result in a pretty massive slide. It's a good chart, and it's a good price for a long-term trade. May very well be that it, well, I don't want to overspeak though. It could be that this doesn't advance early, but it kind of looks like it's trying to make that attempt right now. So we'd have to wait it out. I was about to say it could be that this drops first and then goes up, and then another person might argue it doesn't really need to come this low anyways. I kind of agree. It could be either way. So this is more of an LPS versus a spring action locally. The spring action may take a really long time, going into like next couple of years. This is a really slow moving chart. What I'm seeing is looks more like an up thrust right now, so just keep watching it. It looks like a distribution move. That's a big candle. And then it dropped right back below that creek. So give it another like 10 minutes or so. See if that 30-minute closes below it or above it. It's looking kind of meh to me. I like Siri though. It's a good chart. Sirius XM satellite radio. Well, I think I was right to at least sell temporarily. Hit that line and then pulled back. So now what? I don't know. I guess we'll see. Maybe we will get a second push, but I don't know. It could be as high as it goes. Booksy, did you catch the top? I think I did. Because I sold right there at like 218. So at least today. For now, that's the top. May not be the top forever. if this goes into like a free fall, that's different than like a build out with a second push. I think a build out with a second push could result in a new high, potentially by Wednesday, if even up to like 220. But that could also give AMC and GME time to make another bigger move up as well. If instead IWM kind of falls and does a bigger retracement starting now, that could send us low. So yeah, there's a lot riding on this area. So right now I'm not particularly happy with that push advancement. I want to see it make support over it, not just pop over it and come back down. Sort of the same with the GME. It's kind of reached this first target region that I had. I'm a little concerned this could be a rejection zone. So I'd like to see it build a support here and then advance again. I think it lost the trend too. That's a bummer. Yeah, I think it's having a battle. I don't think it's lost, but it's getting really close. It may have lost it. I don't know. It's really close. It's like right on there. It needs to kind of hold it. Mixed bag here going into the lunch hour. Everything can change on the drop of a hat, you know. So, MPW looks okay. It's kind of approaching this on a little bit of a weakness with the 1 hour coming down, but it could just be that it's also bottoming higher, so it's making higher lows. It could just be a pullback that's necessary before this breach. I'm not really seeing a huge volume buy-in after that creek jump and that 1 hour cross. There's not really a huge buy-in. So what that tells me is that there might need to be, like, again, kind of a backup period. Maybe we'll hit this top at 468 and then we'll need to kind of come back down. Because usually that buy-in happens as support is found. So it might be more like that. So we may not actually just go. We might, just like everything else, kind of need to get a secondary pullback. Overall, looking pretty good though. I'm going to take a break. I'll come back later. I'm not going to leave the stream on because I need to give my computer a break for a little bit. I was having some trouble earlier, so I wanted to give it a rest. But I will post in the Discord when I get back on, and then it'll probably be live before the end of the day, like the last hour and a half. So until then, I hope you guys have a good time, and we'll talk to you in a little bit.